I am officially calling this meeting to order at 6:43 p.m. There are about 34 people on the line, and I will invite the interpreters to please introduce themselves.
Se presenten. Good evening. This message is going to be in Spanish, offering Spanish interpretation. Buenas tardes, señoras y señores. Bienvenidos a esta reunión del CEC 15. Para las personas que desean escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor marquen el número 347-966-4114 e introduzcan el número de PIN o identificación 493-425-435 signo numeral. Una vez más, si desean escuchar esta presentación en español, marque el número 347-966-4114 con el número de PIN o de ID o identificación 493-425-435 signo numeral. Si desea permanecer en este espacio virtual, escuchar la reunión en español y verla en su computadora o teléfono, por favor, marque este número que le acabo de decir, 347-966-4114, con el número de PIN 493-425-435, signo numeral, y ponga sus dispositivos en silencio. Gracias. Thank you.
Is there a second translator? I guess we just have Spanish translation tonight. So I will call the roll. Camille Casaretti. Camille Casaretti. All right.
I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anthony Ferraro, yes, I'm here. Tia Shelsteed.
Here.
Bess Abrams.
Present.
Kimberly Scott.
Here.
Ivan Banda.
Present.
Mark Bizzard.
Present.
Claudia Lechuga.
Here.
And Crystal Kaysen. And Superintendent Scott.
Present.
So
Antonia, I'm sorry, I didn't hear if Crystal is present.
I will call her name again, Crystal Kaysen. It does not appear that she is here.
Okay.
Bess, do you have minutes to present today or no?
No, it's not ready.
Okay, so
Maybe
we
the end
will-
of the meeting, we'll see.
Okay, all right. Well, we may have minutes to approve at the end of the meeting.
Thank you for your help earlier.
Sure. Otherwise, it'll get pushed to the next agenda. So I want to thank you all for coming to District 15's Community Education Council meeting tonight. We appreciate your time and we're glad you could join us. For those of you who are new to CEC meetings, there are 32 CECs throughout the city, plus 4 citywide councils. Each CEC represents a community school district, and each is made up of 11 volunteer members, 9 of whom are elected by the well, no longer. This is actually inaccurate. 9 of us were elected by PTA leaders in the district, but that will no longer be the case starting May 1st when we have our next election. But it is true that the remaining members are appointed by the Brooklyn Borough President. CEC 15 is a state mandated public body responsible for ensuring that public school parents and the public have input in educational decisions that are made at the school district level. Our council reviews education policies and advocates for high quality education that benefit all of our District 15 public elementary and middle school students. There are 35 elementary and middle schools in D15. CEC members serve in an advisory role on education matters to the district superintendent and the chancellor of the Department of Education and elected officials. We approve district zoning lines submitted by the Department of Education. We evaluate our district superintendent. We review the district's educational programs, and we support school leadership teams. We also submit recommendations for the School Construction Authority's annual capital plan. In conjunction with the DOE, we hold joint public hearings on proposals affecting schools in our district. Currently, we are working with the DOE to collaboratively and effectively rezone 7 elementary schools in the northern part of our district referred to as Subzone 3. And we will have some news on that at this meeting with regards to an upcoming meeting on May 11th. And we actively seek input and feedback from the public and encourage you to visit our website, cecd15.org, take a look at our Facebook page, and write to us about any issues you may want to address or learn about. All of our names and contact info are available on our website and in the CEC 15 school liaison list, which I will just drop in the chat here. And please sign in to our attendance sheet, which I will also drop into the chat. And now I will turn it over to Ivan Banda, who is our parliamentarian.
Good evening, everybody. This is the teleconference protocol. Due to the COVID-19 health crisis, CEC 15 will be practicing social distancing. We will be conducting meetings through teleconferencing until further notice. Tonight's calendar meeting will include a public comment period so that we might allow for additional feedback from our school communities. The general rules of engagement. For your own privacy, we ask that you turn off your camera and please use audio only. Please also sign into the Google Doc link in the chat that Antonia just dropped. When you comment, please respect the privacy of others. Please do not include names of children or staff. The public comment period is meant for comments, but as is customary, CEC 15 wants to hear your comments and concerns and help you get them addressed as needed. When answers cannot be given in session, we will provide them in our weekly e-blast or in an upcoming meeting. Please sign up for CEC 15 emails at cec15@schools.nyc.gov. Public comments. If you want to comment, please identify yourself by using the raise hand feature. Please include your questions and contact information in the chat. If you're calling in, press asterisk and the number 9 to comment. We will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. Speakers will be called on one at a time and will be allowed 1 minute each for comment. The speakers will be prioritized from the sign-in sheet via the chat or by emailing cec15@schools.nyc.gov prior to the meeting. We will hear as many speakers as the time allows. If you prefer not to speak, you will still like to submit a question or comment. It is possible that not every question will be given time. So the best way to get your questions answered is always to write to the CEC. Tonight, we're gonna have Halley Potter from the Senior Fellow at the Century Foundation. And she's going to be giving us a presentation about the school-wide enrichment models for 10 minutes. And after that, we're going to have a public comment period and then a CEC member questions and comments. Thank you.
Yvonne, could I just jump
Yes.
in for 1 minute? I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Hi,
Camille
everybody.
Casardi.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here in community with us tonight. For those of you who are celebrating Ramadan, I just want to send blessings of prosperity and cheer. We're all walking this path together and we appreciate you all. As Yvonne was saying, our featured guest for this evening is Miss Halley Potter. She's a senior fellow at the Century Foundation, where she researches policy solutions for addressing educational inequity. Halley is an expert on school integration, preschool equity, charter schools, and college access. She's been a guest of CEC 15 in the past, and we are thrilled to have her back. As we continue to discuss alternative methods for redesign or replacement of the G&T program, this school-wide enrichment model is a way to help all children, elevating every single student, helping them to explore and develop inner strengths and talents in a fun, engaging, inclusive, and enriched setting in collaboration with their friends and peers. Halley has been here with us before, as I said, talking about the school-wide enrichment model, and she graciously accepted our invitation to return. And so thank you so much for being here with us today. Ms. Potter, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, CEC 15 and Camille. You guys should be able to see my screen. So shake your heads or put it in the chat if you can't. I'm going to try to get through as much as I can in about 10 minutes, and then we'll be excited to have questions and engagement from you all. I have found in past experience that it is hard for me to monitor the chat and present at the same time, but if you put things in the chat, I'll be happy to address them afterwards too. So with that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about school-wide enrichment, enrichment for all, and how we can rethink G&T in our city and specifically in D15. So I want everyone to start just by thinking about a few of these questions. If you feel so moved, you can share answers in the chat too. But just as we start the conversation, I think it's helpful to ground it in our own experiences, because everyone is bringing different things to this conversation, and I think it can really shape how we approach some of it. So just think for a minute about what experience you personally have had with gifted and talented education or academic tracking. This could be when you were a student in school. It could be what experiences have been for your children. Maybe you've worked in a school or volunteered in a school. What different academic tracks were available? Was there a gifted and talented program? Which classes were you or your child or your students placed in, and how was that determined? And what kinds of messages did those programs and placements send to you or your child or students that you taught about their identities and abilities? And what about the identities and abilities of others? Do you think you had any benefits as a result of your academic places? Or do you think it had any negative consequences? What happens if you think back on some of those things with a racial equity lens? And well, how do you feel about your experiences now compared to how you felt about some of the things at this time? Would you, going back, would you change anything? Would you keep anything the same? So I encourage you to keep some of this in your mind as we talk about some of these different models that we can use. And in the spirit of that, I feel like it's only fair of me to share a couple of quick things about me so you know who you're hearing from. Again, my name is Halley Potter. I'm a senior fellow at the Century Foundation. And this is not how I always introduce myself, but with respect to those questions, here are 4 quick things about me. My schooling, that's elementary school me. I went to schools, predominantly white schools in Virginia that had a lot of academic tracking, and that included in elementary school about a once a week gifted and talented pullout class that I was part of. So that's one of my first memories of thinking about academic tracking and gifted and talented. My child, I have a 3-year-old, and this is from a scene from Sesame Street that I remember from when I was a kid in elementary school. These monster parents are just so enamored with their baby doing the silliest little things, blowing raspberries and laughing. And that's how I feel about my child. I think she's perfect. I want her to, when she's in school, which will be soon, that I want her to be challenged. I want people to recognize all the talents that she has. I don't want them to put her in a box or label her. I want them to think about her as an individual. My teaching, Before doing education policy research, I taught at an expeditionary learning school in DC, which uses project-based learning. We didn't have a gifted and talented program, but what we did have was different strategies in the classroom of pulling and grouping students together for particular aspects of enrichment. If students needed extra challenge in math, we had a small group that would do that during the day. And my research. So I'm at the Century Foundation, the Progressive Public Policy think tank, and my work is really focused on school integration and equity questions. And so that's the lens that I really bring to when thinking about how we should approach academic challenge and enrichment for students. So with that in mind, what is the purpose of gifted and talented education to begin with? Well, the National Association for Gifted Children is a good place to start. The premier group that advocates for gifted education in the country. And I'm not going to read through everything that's on here, but a couple of the bolded words. So thinking about supporting all children to reach for their personal best, that the role of teachers is to help gifted children develop intellectual and academic potential, that teachers need skills to differentiate instruction. They might use strategies like acceleration, flexible ability grouping, and specialized pull-out programming. So that's one idea of what gifted and talented education should be. How does that compare to New York City's current practices? In New York City, we screen 4-year-olds. The research-based best practices that NAGC, the National Association for Gifted Children, supports say you should be screening at a later age. We, up until very recently, used a single standardized test, and this year we're using a system of parent and teacher recommendations. NAGC says you should actually be using multiple measures. We have a system where gifted and talented identification feeds into a rigid system of separate and segregated classrooms, which is something that less than 10% of all elementary school gifted programs nationwide do. The National Association for Gifted Children says you should be using flexible groupings that students can move in and out of. And there's no particular training or curriculum in gifted programs in New York City. And the National Association for Gifted Children says we should be providing specific teacher training and giving specific curriculum for gifted programs. So all of that together combines to create this system where we also have a really unrepresentative population of students in gifted and talented, as I'm sure many of you may know and be familiar with these demographics. The diversity of all kindergartens looks really different than the kindergartens who even test for GNT and then those who actually end up getting seats. So what do we know nationally? We know some similar things. We know that most gifted programs don't boost academic achievement. There's some information from several recent studies, including one that just was just covered in the news and is actually just coming out next month in May, finding that across the country from a representative sample of 1,300 students, that there were basically no academic positive effects of gifted and talented classrooms, and in fact, no improvement in motivation or engagement for students either. What we do see is we see a lot of racial and social bias in gifted identification. Black and Latinx students and low-income students are less likely to be identified for gifted services, even when you control for prior achievement. In fact, Black students are half as likely as white peers who have the same math and reading achievement to be referred to gifted services. But if Black students have Black teachers, they tend to be identified at similar rates as white peers. So we know bias is coming in different ways. And I think this is important for us to think in New York City, as we had a test-based system, which has played out not to create a representative population. If we switch to teacher recommendations, I think we have reasons to worry about how bias might come out there. So it's time for a change in gifted and talented education. And I would say that should start with less focus on who is getting gifted and how we identify them, but more focus on what gifted education actually is and how we're delivering it. So back to those best practices, using flexible groupings that students can move in and out of. This could look like push-in services or pull-out services, sending students to a higher grade for a particular subject, a model for gifted and talented education that's like an ICT classroom where you are blending identified students and non-identified students, and using a citywide digital learning platform to provide some enrichment. And this is where Schoolwide enrichment model comes in. This is a great way to think about flexible groupings. Providing specific teacher training and curriculum for gifted programs is also really important and something that New York City is not doing right now. And school-wide enrichment can be an important tool for this as well. So I'm going to talk about school-wide enrichment or enrichment for all approaches, which are really successful approaches to enrichment and advanced coursework, especially in elementary and middle school contexts. And then just to put this into the bigger context of the different set of tools that I think schools and districts should be thinking about. Once you go to the middle and high school level, a broader conversation about challenge and enrichment can include thinking about models such as open honors, where students have the ability to take a course for honors, and expanding AP or IB enrollment so that all or most students have those opportunities. But let's drill in a little bit on enrichment for all. So this idea is to take the principles of gifted education and apply them to all students. So that means focusing on students' talents and interests, giving individualized opportunities for advanced instruction, expanding the curricula, providing rigor, and encouraging creativity. These tools are also great tools for differentiating instruction in integrated classrooms. So the school-wide enrichment model, one approach to enrichment for all, is a particular model that was developed at the University of Connecticut. And it starts with an understanding of giftedness that's different than what most programs have, which is different from what I was familiar with until I started studying the school-wide enrichment model. So the idea is that you aren't focused on labeling individual students as gifted or not gifted, but you're really focused on thinking about gifted behaviors. And so there's the idea that there are three different components of what makes gifted behavior. There's above average ability. That's probably the first thing most people think of, but there's also creativity and there's task commitment. And all students at some point have the capacity to be moving in and out of these three rings. Even if most of the time, or maybe none of the time, they might have all three of these ingredients combined. You might have a student who's showing extreme creativity, even though they're not an above average achiever, or a student who's incredibly committed to a task. And this lens helps teachers and educators in the school think about these three things as valuable components of academic achievement, of creativity and ingenuity, and figure out how do we give all students access to enrichment to encourage that, and focus on developing those gifted and creative behaviors. So the school-wide enrichment model is a school-wide model. It has a whole bunch of different components. And that's what this crazy infographic here is showing you. And I'm not going to go into all of them, but I'm just going to talk about a couple of the components that are especially important. So here, the regular curriculum. What this means is that in the classroom, ideally in a school-wide enrichment model setting, there's teacher training and tools for differentiation across all subjects that teachers are using as part of their daily work. This next component is the enrichment clusters. This is what a lot of people think about as kind of the key part of what makes school-wide enrichment model a little different than some other models they might have seen. These are interest-driven, project-based learning opportunities for all students. Here's an example of some of the little posters from enrichment clusters at an elementary school that is using school-wide enrichment. The idea is that schools group students for the enrichment based on their interests, which they figure out by giving students surveys and teachers observing students. So these are intentionally mixed ability groupings. And then teachers facilitate enrichment for these clusters of students who share a broad common interest. So maybe it's math or athletics, or maybe it's social justice, and they guide students in developing specific topics and projects to undertake within that umbrella. The clusters use project-based learning approaches, and students bring their individual strengths and interests to the projects. So this can happen then in terms of the calendaring. It can happen perhaps Wednesday afternoon is cluster time, and everyone in the school is involved in enrichment clusters. All students are in some enrichment cluster. Teachers are leading these different small groups. Non-teaching staff is also often helping out to lead things. You might also have some, potentially some volunteers or guest leaders who are leading some of these opportunities. And then this other piece of school-wide enrichment model that I just want to touch on is here, the continuum of special services. Within a school-wide enrichment model, you can still have identified students who are showing gifted behaviors and serve them in additional ways. So again, the focus is on identifying gifted behaviors, not students. So classroom teachers are monitoring with an emphasis on encouraging those behaviors. And students may be identified to have gifted behaviors at a particular subject at a particular time. It's not a label that's slapped on them and sort of maintained throughout. Some students then that are identified to receive additional gifted services get those services the same they would if they had an IEP. So there might be some push-in or pull-out services. There might be small grouping or individual adapting of assignments, curriculum compacting, which is when students go through material much faster to make space and time for other material that can provide them with additional depth or rigor. And acceleration. They might even be joining an older grade for a particular subject, particular time of the day. In the same way that in special education, we place a priority on finding the least restrictive setting for students. A school-wide enrichment model takes a similar approach that serving these gifted students should be done in a way where they are part of the normal activities of the school, and that encouraging these particular specific gifted behaviors happens as part of the day folded in. So this question of who gets gifted, which has been such a sticky question in New York, is I think a less of a focus on it when you have school-wide enrichment model, in part because you've designed programs so that all students can benefit from enrichment, knowing that whatever screening you have is never going to be perfect. Then knowing that you still can have screening, you can use multiple measures, you can look at how students may be showing gifted behaviors in one subject or another, not necessarily in all at the same time. You can design backwards from diversity, so to make sure that you have an identification process that is reaching a diverse group of students. And that might mean using some local criteria. So letting a certain percentage of students at an elementary school be eligible for this rather than having a district-wide or a city-wide universal standard. There's a lot of research on the benefits of school-wide enrichment model that includes benefits for both high ability and low ability students, both traditionally gifted identified students and students who don't have that designation. Oops, the back one. And so what does this look like if you actually want to implement this? Well, at the district level, one of the things that can be very helpful is to have some district support. In the District of Columbia, Washington, DC, they have a number of schools that use school-wide enrichment model, and they've added some folks at the district level that are specifically tasked with supporting the school-wide enrichment model schools. Many schools that are SEM schools have a full-time SEM coordinator or resource teacher, but some schools, if they don't have a position that can be dedicated to that, have a SEM committee instead. So staff members who have another role also fulfill work together to coordinate this part of the program. Ideally, there could be monthly PD for some schools. And the district could fund training for teams of teachers to go to different week-long trainings over the summer. It can be really big or it can be really small how you're doing SEM. You can start off with just one grade level. You can say, we're just thinking about the enrichment clusters first. We're going to do that. We'll have a small team of trained staff. Other teachers are going to participate in a boot camp to lead enrichment clusters. And the costs of that can be quite minimal. One-time training for a small team of teachers and principal, and strategic use of your existing PD to kind of try this out and get it off the ground. If you want to do it large scale and really thinking about the full school-wide model, you have all grades participating, you have enrichment clusters, you're also supporting teachers to use classroom supports for differentiation and targeted services for identified students. And there you would want to support that with teams of multiple teachers who are attending trainings every year. It could be helpful, but not necessary to have district level support staff. And ideally a school level SEM coordinator position. And I'll just mention that there are other approaches to enrichment for all that are also really successful in their kind of homegrown things that schools have come up with. You know, the tools of differentiation, project-based learning, give students the opportunity to show creativity. That's something that good teachers at many different schools are doing. Here's an example of a school in Baltimore that does something they call intensive learning periods that they developed on their own, and that really captures much of the same idea around school-wide enrichment models. They're bringing students together of diverse abilities. And in this case, strategically grouping both students who have a real need to be challenged in an area and students who need support in an area. So you might have students grouped together for an intensive on nonfiction science writing that includes some students who are really struggling in writing, and some students who have shown extreme interest in science and want that challenge, and students across all these different abilities who then are getting both enrichment and support out of the same time periods that have been blocked. So I know I did double the time that you wanted, but I'm so excited about this subject. That's my only excuse for going way over. With that, I am going to stop. I'll stop my screen share too, so that I can see the chat and faces better, and would welcome any questions that folks have.
Thank you, Haley. We're going to have the period of public comment now. And then can we check the chat? Any hands raised? Vincent Liu.
Hi, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you, Ms. Porter, for your presentation. And I just have two questions for you. And since you mentioned that low-income students are less likely to be identified as gift for the gift and talent program, which is kind of contrary to what's being widely reported, which majority of students enrolled into gift and talent program are actually low-income students. I'm wondering, do you have any specific data to support that statement, perhaps that you can share with our parents, because that's very contrary to what we know. And the DOE doesn't seem to release admission rate by race or low income status. And the second part of my question is, you mentioned about some of the recommended approach on gift and talent can be incorporating multiple measurement, include like teachers' recommendation, which I think that it's more likely to have a human bias. I think that you mentioned that it can be more objective than single admission exam. So I'm wondering if you can elaborate into those areas. It can help us understand the benefit, making a comparison of the two. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Liu. Two really good questions. I was just furiously Googling to see if I was trying to remember if I've used the statistic on low income enrollment in G&T programs before, and I couldn't find it on my first Google, and it has been harder to find, but I believe from when I looked before that there is a large disparity in the percentage of students who are eligible for free and reduced price lunch in G&T programs versus in the broader school population. And if anyone else on the call has that specific data at your fingertips, please do share it as well. And to your other point about data on or the different types of bias and ways that bias can come into systems and not. And I think it's a really good point. Part of why New York City originally moved to a system of using just a single test to have admission to gifted and talented was the hope that this would expand and diversify G&T. This was that happened under the Bloomberg administration, and that was how it was announced, and there was good hope behind that. And I think for all, many of the reasons that we've seen in the data and that you pointed to, that more subjective measures can indeed let bias creep in. What we saw in New York City, though, was that the test still produced results that look so far different from what the New York City public school population looks like, that there's a real consensus among educators that that's not accurately capturing the gifts and talents of our students. And so we know this in terms of how standardized tests are validated and changed, that we have to do some backwards planning from identification measures. And if something is producing a result that seems so wildly different from what we know to be true in terms of the different gifts and talents that students are bringing to the table, that we need to fix the measurement tool and not let the measurement tool be our limit. And that's where the National Association for Gifted Children has come out very clearly saying you should not use a single test. You should not test children as young as 4 years old. And you should be using multiple measures, because at least then the hope is that different types of bias might be able to cancel each other out or work together to come up with something of a better result.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. I think that the additional step we can take is that we can expand some of the program to the area that's very underserved. So the access is there for those community. That's how I see it. And I think that could be a very important step to take. Thank you. But again, if you have data, anyone has data to share, I'm subscribed to this CEC 15. If you can share that data, that would be also very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Do we have any other persons from the public?
Yeah, this is Elizabeth Garraway, principal of PS 118.
Thank you, please. Yes.
Hello. Just to make a comment about testing being the sole measure. We know that in the United States that racism is the fabric in which our system is built. So having a test where everyone is supposed to be able to do the same thing in itself is biased. Because when you go to certain neighborhoods, they don't have access. Giving access to what? Are we giving them access to the vocabulary that certain students have, epigenetically had in their family for generation upon generation? Are we giving them access to some of those beautiful class trips, the travels, the culture that some are privileged to and others are not? I had a nephew, just a personal, I know I got a minute, but I have a personal example where my daughter, who went to 321, we took her and some other kids to take the test for Brooklyn Tech. I had a nephew living in another neighborhood. He was supposed to go. He didn't show up. And I was like, why didn't you show up? He goes, well, my teacher said that only 2 people from my school ever passed the test. So I said, what was the point anyways? So systemically, in so many of these schools, the educators who are largely of a different ethnic background than these students are not encouraging them. There's this deep disconnect. Having the ability to study the same thing, the same quality of educators, it's just not happening.
Thank you for your comment. Let me check the Christine.
Hi, yeah, I'm
okay. Go ahead.
I'm Christine Beda. Thank you. I'm one of the PTA co-presidents at PS 38. We have one of the G&T programs in the district, and some members of our school community are starting to look at ways we might change our G&T program, whether it's a good idea to retain that at the school, whether we should shift to a different model, regardless of whether the city whatever the city decides to do or is done at the district level. And I guess I just had a question about the school-wide enrichment model, because I know it's become increasingly popular and a lot of people are talking about it. And when I sort of hear people, even in our community, talking about it, there seem to be two sort of tracks to thinking about it. And one is, and I understand where it came from and the Renzulli model, how it is a model of gifted education, but with this concept that it's enrichment for all and developing the gifted and creative behaviors of all students. There are some who sort of, I think, focus on that aspect of it, which is developing everybody's talents and abilities, because of course we can't know when children start out and they develop them over time. And there are others who think that that continuum of special services, that last piece, so that extra, that perhaps children who are identified as having gifted behaviors, they get something extra in addition to that. And I guess I wondered whether it is an essential component of the model to have that last piece. And if you don't have that last piece and you're just looking at it as a model of enrichment for all, is it still this school-wide enrichment model, or is that really some other model? And I guess I ask that because I feel like there's a little bit of confusion sometimes when people talk about this, and if we want to be intentional about what we're replacing, I just want to make sure that whether that has to be a piece of it and we're understanding it correctly.
Yeah, that's another really good question. So school-wide enrichment model was developed as a model for gifted education. And Joseph Renzulli and Sally Reese, who developed it together. Sally Reese is a former head of the National Association for Gifted Children. This came out of their research on serving identified gifted students. So a lot of the research on school-wide enrichment model began with using that just to serve gifted students as sort of an approach to gifted education. Now, so I think that's important to say, because it's a little bit hard to draw the distinction. The goal of the methods in school-wide enrichment model are to be using really high quality gifted education services. So if that is done really well in a school, it's part of why I was saying that kind of the identification of gifted services and gifted behaviors and the additional services is just for stakes in a school-wide enrichment model, because it's baked into the way that that teachers are thinking about how they're differentiating instruction to begin with, and everyone is getting access to the same types of enrichment opportunities through enrichment clusters that look quite similar to what in other places only identified gifted students would be getting access to. So I think it is still really important to say that enrichment for all doesn't mean everyone's getting the same thing. To the contrary, it's about doing differentiation really well. So that might mean that individual students need additional challenge in particular places, but that then looks like much more individualized things than sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. So it might look like a third grader who goes and joins the fourth graders or the fifth graders for math, or it might look like a teacher who has 3 students in his class that he has a particular social studies assignment that they're doing. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but I think that is an important part of the lens. It's not that you're saying one thing is going to solve this for every student, but on the same token, there's nothing to suggest that you need necessarily a kind of standard approach to identification and additional services that's the same way that we've been doing it before.
Hi, guys.
Thank
Can
you.
I speak? I'm waiting for approval to speak.
Sure, go ahead.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm Vanessa McKnight. A few people on the line know me. I have a grandson who started out in preschool, and he did extremely well. They wanted us to take him out of preschool in order to put him already straight into kindergarten. So we had a family discussion. It's my son's child, and my son was very bright as well as myself. And I'll tell you a little history about that. And we decided that he needed the socialization. At the time, he was an only child, that he needed certain socialization that come along with preschoolers. And we found that if we pushed him to go straight to kindergarten, he would miss that part of like the preschool for his actual peers' age. So when he did leave preschool and he joined PS15, he did first grade. He did in kindergarten. He aced it, top of his class, the smartest pretty much in the class, and he still was pushing. So what happened when he got to the second grade was that he knew all of the work. So they put him in September. By the time October 30 something came close to his mom's birthday, they said, well, he knows everything in second grade, but he's acting, like I said, well, he's bored and he's not being challenged. So what they did was what Halley just explained. They removed him from the second grade and they put him in the third grade. But according to the DOE, he needed to attend for math only because he has to have the second grade math. So now because of COVID, he's in the third grade, but he had an advantage because he had already done a lot of the third grade stuff. And I look at this kid, he's literally on his tablet that provided his Apple tablet, and he's doing several other things and writing out of a book. And I'm looking at him, but his father went to PS15s, and when he left there in sixth grade, they just kept him on the stage. He took the mayor's award. He took everything. Again, smartest one in the class. My brother and myself went to PS15. When we left there, school was still, of course, I'm a little old, getting out at sixth grade as opposed to fifth grade. And we went to junior high school 51, and I did seventh and eighth grade simultaneously. But what my mother did was make sure that we still respected and didn't have an attitude that I'm smarter than you, because she kept us level with our actual peers of our grade. But a lot of it also, and I have to say, it comes from, we are very big on education in my family. And I was blessed to be able, my first grandchild, I have an only child, my grandson, who I was telling you about, PS15, I went old school. I believe in index cards. They work. Everything was anybody that came to my house to visit, any of you would come to that. We had postcards, and you just make a joke. Aiden, what's that word? But kids equate to, if I put it on a dresser, you know that that's a dresser. He started to be able to read in essence before he really knew how to actually spell the words. So I would take the words around the house and I would make sentences, and he would be able to read them because he actually saw them, and the word also equated to the dresser. So there are different ways of seeing how gifted your child is, and it takes a lot of parent involvement, I do believe, as well, with most children that have things of that nature going on. And I believe in for $3 that you can really help your kid learn to read. So by the time Aiden got to kindergarten, he was reading fluently. I mean, fluently. Right now, he's in the third grade. He's reading on fifth or sixth grade level because he's intelligent, and we enhanced on that as a family. His parents and myself, we communicate well. They don't live here, my son has a wife and everything, but we're really strict, and you don't really have to. We engaged him a lot ourselves. So the point I'm going to make is that we didn't know if he was gifted or not, but the fact that we also put the effort in to see where he was at and what did he like and what didn't he like. So parent involvement plays a huge role. And like I said, for a $3 pack of index card, and it's such a game, everybody would look forward when they came to my house to be like, Aiden, what's that word? And he would go lamp, LAMP. So for $3, your kid is gifted because it's nothing but repetitiveness and, a little more extra effort. Yes, school providers are excellent, but parents also have to try to pick up the ball to assist their children, as well as the educators that we leave that spend more time with our children than we do, or even their own children, because they're busy helping us educate our children. So I think it's a group effort that should take place across the board, and explain this to most people. Even the poorest neighborhood can afford a pack of index cards, and it will be a fun thing. The kids are capable. The kids that are considered ungifted can work a computer better than you. Every child knows how to work a phone better than me, I know that. Or computer, pretty much. They learn as soon as you give it to them, and on their own without our assistance, because we don't know. So I'm not up so much for gifted and talented programs. I do believe that every child should be enriched and given the chance. If not given the chance, you won't know what a child is capable of. And a test shouldn't determine your whole future, because not for nothing, I know a whole bunch of people with PhDs, and they're not with shaking. They're not all that bright. They can pass a test, but they're not all that bright.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for your comment. We have another person, I think, Miriam, you on the call?
Yes, I'm here. I'm outside, so I'm going to turn my video off. Yeah, I have a question for Halley about the application or the appropriateness of the school-wide enrichment model to children who are typically called twice exceptional, because I know that in the DOE, kids who have disabilities and also are high achievers often have a hard time getting both services for both sort of sides of their profile. And so I would imagine that the school-wide enrichment model would be much more appropriate for these children. And I'm wondering whether you've encountered any data around that in your research.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Miriam.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can say anecdotally from the school-wide enrichment model schools that I have visited and studied, that several of them in particular have a real emphasis on serving students who have a wide range of different IEPs and to serve above average number of students with IEPs as compared to the districts that they're in. And so from those particular examples and hearing to the school leaders and teachers there talk about how well project-based enrichment is a tool for differentiating instruction and meeting those individual needs. I've seen that to be really successful. And this I would have to go back and check, but I believe that some of the studies that have been done on school-wide enrichment model have specifically focused on twice exceptional students. So I will follow up on that because I don't want to misquote them, but I believe that that particular issue has been studied and that there were positive results of using this model.
Thank you, Halley. Are we going to the CC members now? Oh no, wait a second. Let me double check my, is Nancy, probably gonna be our last person, and then we're gonna go to the CC members. Thank you, Nancy. Are you on the call?
Yes, thank you. I have a question, Halley. I'm sorry, for a minute I had to step away because I was getting dinner ready for my kids. So you might have said this, but are there District 15 schools that follow this model, or are there any schools in nearby districts that you could mention, that just so I can get an idea of something on the ground that I might know of?
Yeah, actually, I would love to hear from folks on the CEC, because I know from, a number of months ago now, that when I've joined you before, from hearing that there are particular examples. They're not ones that I have studied. In New York, if I had to point to one school that I think is a really excellent example, Bell Academy is a school that was started from scratch as a school-wide enrichment model school and has hosted a lot of people from other cities to see kind of how it's done. This is in a middle school context. and they're a really great example. But I believe that there are some schools in District 15 that are maybe doing some version of school-wide enrichment model or contemplating some of it. But maybe folks on the CEC can tell me if that's the case. Or, yeah, Superintendent Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you. So actually, there are no schools that are officially SEM models. There used to be. There was a whole school-wide enrichment push a long time ago. There is a school that I know of, it is right almost literally across the border. It's in District 13, and they just recently became a school-wide enrichment school, and that's PS9. And they had been a gifted and talented school. They were a school that offered lots of enrichments to all their children. They have numerous enrichment programs. And as a community, they decided that they wanted to go from being a gifted and talented program school to a school-wide enrichment program school. And this is something that is being, as I believe one of the co-presidents of 38 spoke to, this is something that is being looked at in other places in the district as well.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Anita. And we're going to go with the CEC members now, comments or questions. Thank you.
Do you just want to call the roll?
Okay, Camille.
Haley, thank you so much. I am going to shut my video because my internet seems unstable. But I just want to say that I love this model. I've researched it for years. Many years ago, my children were at PS32 and they had a modified this where they had SEMAs and they were light of the year. And it was just such a beautiful thing to watch all of the children engage each other and come together with exploring so much. I realize that this be a reality for many of our schools. I hope that people continue to learn about it, and thank you for sharing your gifts and talent. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Camille. Antonia?
Yeah, thank you so much, Haley. I really liked the picture of you, the class picture of you. It kind of reminded me of my experience in school. I was not gifted or talented, but I remember back then they had something called Rainbows and they had resource room. And students would be pulled out for these two things. And I was always jealous. And I said to one of the boys who was in Rainbows, like, what is it you guys do? And he kind of like explained what they were doing. And I thought, I can do that. Why don't I get to go to Rainbows? It was like, so I'm, very excited about a model where all of our children's gifts and talents can be explored, because I do sincerely believe that they all have different gifts and talents. And then I recall later on in my middle school years when I eventually did get to be in a like honors for social studies or honors for English, but I wasn't honors for different things. Like there was some flexibility in my scheduling. I wasn't just tracked, it was more individualized. And I really hope that my children can benefit from that as they go through the school system. So I hope this can be implemented. Thank you for sharing that there's, different ways of doing it. It's not all or nothing. But I do think given the amount of money that our schools are going to be receiving next year from many sources, I think this should be prioritized for sure. So that's it. Thank you.
May I
Thank you,
say
Antonio.
two quick things in response
Yes.
to Antonio?
Haley?
First, thank you for sharing your own experience too. I've found that everyone has a story to tell when they think back about how academic tracking has affected them, and think we can learn a lot from that. Also, just the idea that the flexibility. One of the things I found in conversations with parents, and even my daughter's going to be in pre-K in the fall and doing Zoom pre-K tours, is if you make it a separate classroom, part of what feels really high stakes is your child is either in that class, all the time and presumably in that track forever, or not. And that also means that if your child is not in a school that has a gifted and talented program, that some set of peers, your child's never going to interact with them. We've turned it into a really high stakes thing that I think adds a lot of stress to the equation. And if we just break that apart, there's a totally different way to approach this that I think brings a lot of joy and possibility. And the other thing I was just going to say about the funding, which you brought up, I think that school-wide enrichment model is also a great example of something where some of the federal support that is coming to New York City could really be the startup money to get something going that does not take a significantly different investment over time. There may be some different allocation of staff a little bit in a building, but some buildings make it work all different kinds of ways. So we're not talking about something that is necessarily really expensive over the long run. And this chance here to use funds to give the training and the support at the district level could be so exciting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Tia?
I won't take up a lot of time, but I just wanted to thank you for this very important presentation. Thank you very much. Very exciting.
Thank you, Tia. Bess?
Hi. Yeah, I want to, thank you for coming. It was my first time hearing you. I was really happy to hear personal stories in the beginning, and I will very quickly add that I had I was tracked lower most of my life, and certainly by middle school, I had trouble learning, I think probably to read, although I'm not dyslexic, but, had some learning differences then. And that was a negative experience for me, being tracked. And it followed me into middle school. So, and then high school was different, but these personal experiences are of who has and hasn't, all this stratification is really unnecessary. So I was really moved by, hearing about this new paradigm shift. However, this is really what I want to say. It's more of a comment than, and maybe you have some thoughts on it, but my comment is that, however, certainly at least at the elementary school, children get quickly separated, and I guess it could have been anyway, mostly for their ability to read, right? Elementary is learning to read, and then you move from reading to learn. So doesn't it also seems to me, instead of this, I just don't like even the words gifted or talented. I think all kids have this. What if we approached reading or the first fundamental skills and basic math as if everyone was dyslexic or everyone needed phonetics, and then the kids who didn't need it didn't have it, but everyone was taught in an evidence-based way that is proven to help all kinds of learners, right? So like you were talking, what the wonderful, the woman who called in about her grandson, labeling things that actually match the thing, this is to teach it. And so if we taught better in the early stages, the whole child, we would have better, we would not have to stratify, right? And this is, my opinion and something I just feel so strongly about. We need to get also to the basics. Our teaching has to be better and more inclusive of all the kids. And then this to me seems like an approach for the school, which recognizes this, and children's development is not so linear always. So I love it, but I also just really want to make that comment that I'm so frustrated with, some of the models that we're using to get kids before they get into track somewhere that they don't necessarily need to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Bess. Kimberly?
Thank you very much. This was the most eye-opening presentation that I've heard in quite some time on this topic. I have a quick question. One of the examples that you gave, or one of the strategies, was to have sort of the mixed classes. So if there's a second or third grader who's excelling in math or in a particular subject, they start to spend more time in a higher grade for that subject. I guess my question is, how do the ways of assessing whether someone's doing well in a subject also change? Is it solely based on the test that's given in that subject, this test that always exists, or are there different ways of looking at how someone should be placed in a higher grade?
Yeah, you want to turn this into a conversation about testing and assessment and that big question? And I think they're all, yes, it's both in terms of how you think about the assessment in terms of what level of challenge students need, and in terms of you think about the assessment in terms of measuring student progress. In both of those areas, schools that are doing school-wide enrichment well, like other schools that are just have high quality teaching and learning, need to be using a variety of different ways of assessing students. And it's not just tests, portfolios and performance tasks. And so, yeah, I think that in some ways, part of what makes this such a powerful issue, even though the number of students affected by gifted and talented education in New York City is really, a very small slice, is I think it does get at some of these much bigger questions that we're really thinking about in terms of building a really robust and thriving public education.
Yeah, because it seems to me you can't have one without the other. You have to address how we assess our students as well as how we set the environment for them to excel. Thank you again. It was a great presentation.
Thank you, Kimberly. Claudia?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you again, Halley, for that presentation. I actually have a few comments that I sort of listed down from my own mind, but I really wanted to highlight Principal Garraway's comment of just access in and of itself is like a really big indicator for entry. When I had my own child tested, the commentary as we're in the waiting room was really a discussion among parents of like, who did you use? What program did you use? And me, I went into it very naively thinking like my kid tests in, whatever, it's a true assessment of what she is and I'll be okay with it. But it was really upsetting to see that like so pervasive and it's just incredibly normalized. So it really turned me off to the whole process and really understanding like a lot of the disparities are rooted in different ways and really like perpetuate themselves. I wanted to also bring up like the highlight of like, excuse me, I'm trying to fight a cold, but the discussion around like the shift from what I understand, the school-wide enrichment model is really like to level the access to everybody. It's not really like in theory, I think some people can actually see that it could be damaging or think that it's being damaging to students that are truly gifted. But I really think it's really highlighting meeting students where they are so that then students that are actually, advanced or need the extra enrichment or like challenging environment, that they can actually also get it, as well as all the other kids actually get that meeting where you're at scenario. But also like from an education standpoint, it's realizing the benefit of having both racially and ethnically diverse student peers is also a really big asset to education, social emotional learning, but just overall like access to society and access to student development, to being able to interact with peers that are diverse from them and not really sort of insular groups. What I wanted to ask you, Halley, is just a comment. You mentioned it briefly, but it's been sort of brought up in different ways, but like, what resources would be needed for schools to shift to this model most seamlessly? You mentioned like the scenario of like having like an ICT class teacher setup, where in that scenario, imagine you would need an additional teacher or someone that you could sort of transition into. Are there any other elements that you think would be really integral to ensuring the success to that transition, like development or training for teachers, for even identifying or really sort of moving away from like a structured one fit model for everybody, which is very sort of common in our testing models, but really sort of identifying interest from students? I see somebody in the chat mentioned the Google Genius Hour, which seems amazing, where it's student-led teaching. Is it really that simple that you're sort of carving out space, or are there really other integral parts to this transition that would need to be made sure to be included?
I'll just say, I think carving out the space for something and things like this Google Genius Hour, and I mentioned a school that has learning intensives. I talk a lot about Schoolwide enrichment model because I think it's a great model and because it has a name. It's a model. It's codified, and so there are a number of schools that are doing it. So we can talk about it and it could be something to strive for, but that doesn't make it any better than a homegrown model that's unique to a particular school. It's just much harder to talk about scaling something like that. And the first step, I think, is starting with kind of an enrichment period, enrichment clusters or something like that is a great place to start. And that can be done scaling up, thinking about starting with one grade and moving from there, phasing in over the years. And that's a good way for schools to be able to try and do something with some fidelity without necessarily making a huge shift overnight. And one additional thing that I think has been really powerful in other districts and that New York City could consider is having some consolidation of resources for enrichment and providing academic challenge, perhaps at, by grade level that is done at a district level, so that individual teachers can tap into some of that. I think that's the biggest thing again here, like excellent classroom teachers are doing 95% of this already on their own. But as we know, if the past year has shown us anything, we are asking teachers to do a million things. And so one of the things that can help get this off the ground is say, how can we make it so that we aren't constantly asking teachers to reinvent the wheel, and give some tools that they can use in their classrooms to help make the differentiation piece of this possible.
Thank you, Claudia.
And one more comment you want to forget.
Go ahead, Claudia.
No, I'm so sorry, Mark, to cut into time. One more comment that I didn't get around to, but I'll echo the sentiment of just the use and the terminology for gifted in and of itself can actually be damaging to people if you're classified as that. And sort of, I see it a lot in my, as someone that was gifted and talented throughout their school and skipped a grade, particularly among immigrant communities, that expectation can be incredibly damaging.
Yeah, I'll just
thank you.
My turn, Evan? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, I really appreciate that comment. And I'll say one of the things that I, in my conversations and my writing about this that I've gone back and forth with on is sort of how much do we talk about kind of, blowing up the system of how we talk about gifted education versus kind of working within the norms. And right now, a lot of my thinking and writing on this, I have been using more of the terminology of gifted education and the National Association for Gifted Children, not because I'm 100% on board with what they're doing, but because I think that a lot of the concern that I've seen from parents that I'm talking about are that I'm talking to about this issue is a concern that we are moving away from gifted education. And I want to challenge that particular assumption, because I don't think what New York City has been doing is gifted education the way that that real advocates of gifted education are promoting it. So I feel like that flawed starting point in some ways has polarized us a bit, and I'm hopeful that people who are are really interested in capturing some of what the National Association for Gifted Children is really passionate about advocating for can actually find a lot of common ground with folks who see the potential and opportunity in school-wide enrichment model of not labeling students, of approaching this in a much more individualized way.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, Haley, you just answered a couple of questions. I really appreciate you talking about the language because the elephant in the room is that Claudia, I had a similar experience at some of my early CEC meetings about people were really angry about removing a G&T program. And I got comments from people say, well, I just don't want my kids to go to school with the wild kids. And that's code. We know what that is. And that's not gifted and talented, that's sorting. So, my one soapbox moment here is I would want to get back to that early part of the conversation about, hey, we need an alternative before we stop testing 4-year-olds. No, we don't. We can stop testing 4-year-olds today. That's pretty straightforward. There's no objective test that's worth giving to a 4-year-old. And if we're giving test prep to 4-year-olds in this district, it should stop now. And our superintendent should hear that. It's inappropriate. Separate apart from that, thank you so much. As a former teacher from a family of teachers who have over 6 decades of teaching experience, that language that you used is just wonderful about gifted behavior instead of gifted kids. I call it the kid with his head on the desk. I had so many kids with heads on the desk that were gifted, but came from tough circumstances where, the art of the teaching was to get their heads off the desk and engage them in different ways. And that's why teachers are our heroes in this moment. But that language of kind of that usually those kids are the kids that get tracked in the wrong track. And unless we change our model, that's not going to change. And we're just going to be sorting kids, and they're going to fall along class lines and race lines and ethnicity lines. That's pretty straightforward. And that's what we got here. I'm sad to say that the last time you came in, we had more enrichment programs rolled out in the district than we do now. I do see that there's some encouragement that schools are thinking about this and talking about this, but I think it's a call to action, and I appreciate you being here to shine a light on that. I did have 2 questions though. One about that kid with a head on his desk. You said one of the 3 things that this model looks at is commitment level. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about commitment level and how do you balance for equity in that piece? Because when I hear that, I presume it's not that, but when I hear that, I worry about that kid with the head on the desk who doesn't have the ability to assert that level of commitment. I'm interested in how you measure that, if it's an inextricable part of the 3 legs of the stool you were talking about. And then second, just to a little bit of riffing on what Claudia had said, how much scale do you need for something like this to be successful, and how fast can you set something like this up? Can you pilot in the classroom at a school level, or do we need to have district-wide adoption in order for it to truly be successful? Like what scale do you see as something where you've actually changed? I mean, you can change a kid's life, but how do you envision that working, and how quick, if we said yes, could you stand it up?
Yeah, great question. So for the piece of the 3-ring conception of giftedness, so above average achievement, creativity, and attention to the task. That attention to the task piece is, to your point, I think there may be ways in which one view of a classroom teacher or parent, you could say, well, this student is never turning in homework. That's not attention to the task. That's not exactly what the 3 rings of giftedness is really focusing on. The attention to the task is when students are experiencing what, like in our kind of adult work world, I don't know if you guys are reading articles I'm reading that talk about flow, when you are just really into an activity. And for a student, that could be, and it might be something that's non-academic. It's like, what is really driving a student? And so I think it's important to think about all of the different circumstances and family backgrounds that come into play, and how in the same way that for all of us and as adults living through a pandemic right now, I find it really hard personally just to find flow and attention to the task to anything, right? Like that comes in, all of those social emotional pieces come in. But I think for educators, the trick is to see, where are you seeing pieces of that in a student where you might not even have expected, right? So you could have a student who is struggling in math, but also so excited about this new concept that they have learned and really focused on that. And that's where the 3 rings of giftedness is. You say, okay, I see this, and maybe this particular student, I don't actually see how they're going to progress to at this stage to be in the advanced math achievement. But can I couple that that excitement that this child has about subtraction with an opportunity for this child to be really creative, and and the intersection of those two things. So I think that that's a great point. And then, oh goodness, I was going to write down, because you asked. Can you remind me really quickly?
Oh, just scale, like what scale and stand up time.
Oh yeah.
So how quick can we get it up, and how?
It does not need to be district level. I think it's great if it's district level, because part of the problem with our approach to gifted and talented education has also been to say, oh, well, you need a whole classroom of kids to have a gifted and talented program. So that means we can't do this in every school, because we can't have a whole class in every school. Schoolwide enrichment model instead says we're changing this as just our approach. And so everyone gets it. And we don't have to think about that as limiting the number of schools that a child can attend because of the services available. So I think there's a real advantage to doing it in multiple schools, but you can do this at the school level. The principal, founding principal of Bell Academy, and who then founded Veritas Academy to SEM schools in New York City. I was drilling her on this a couple months ago over Zoom, and I said, but really, like, what does it take to get it done? And she said to me, Halley, a principal with a few strong teachers can do this. You start with people who are really bought into the model, and she talked about some of the biggest challenge of being kind of the mindset shift that everyone has to be committed to truly believing that every student deserves those enrichment opportunities, but that with that there's a lot that's possible.
Thank you, Mark. And the only comment that I would like to say is getting a little bit of Claudia's comment, is that many years ago I was a high school teacher, a bilingual teacher of history in San Francisco, and a lot of my students were it was the first year in America, and speaking English was so hard for them, but a lot of them knew math. So by the end of the year, first year, a lot of the kids that were getting better in English, they were running, and pretty much after couple hours after we finished school, they were running a classroom of algebra and math, and with the math teacher that was also a Latina lady. And it was, as an educator, sometimes we need to find those gifted kids, that can help you others. It wasn't anything that I was teaching, but they were able, and that was educators keeping an eye on other students and benefiting the whole school. Thank you. We're gonna go now with Camille, and thank you, Halley, for your presentation. It's been great. Camille, you have a few words before you give your report.
Yeah, thank you, Halley. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm just going to keep my video off because it keeps saying internet unstable and I don't want to totally glitch out. So again, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. I saw a lot of people jumping on the call. So again, I just want to wish everyone celebrating a very happy Ramadan. I hope you're all staying safe and finding ways to enjoy this beautiful weather. Sadly, many of us are still experiencing deaths of loved ones. And as we're entering the second year of the pandemic, please be mindful that many of our friends and school community members will be reflecting on the losses that have occurred and that people are still facing in our district and throughout New York City. We see that vaccines are available, restaurants are opening, people are playing in the park, and it's starting to feel like we have some sense of freedom to come and go during the summer. But please do be vigilant. Don't take your health for granted. We have to work together. We all have to look out for one another. Wear your mask. That's the only way we're going to get through this. And we are lucky and grateful that we have a district that really comes together in times of need. Building this community with a sense of oneness and respect and appreciation for each person and child is something that we all have been working towards for many years. And I'm personally excited to have been part of that work, watching the movement, and happy to continue working together with all of you towards a greater good. We have some exciting news from the PAR team. After almost a year of on-the-ground research, hundreds of meetings with individuals from the community seeking feedback and sharing information through a pandemic, they are reaching a point where they feel comfortable to make some recommendations around the rezoning of Subdistrict 3. We were on a call with some of the team members this morning who are here today, and I welcome you all. I am thrilled to report that they will be able to share details with us on May 11th. So please save this date. We are also expecting to see a draft potential rezoning scenario reflecting their recommendations. And as you all may recall, the panel for education policy will be holding a meeting tomorrow evening where they're going to be voting on the proposed reconfiguration of PS 676, where they would transform from an elementary to a middle school. And that would include District 75 seats, which we really need and want in our community. Last week at the joint public hearing, I read CEC 15's statement in support of the proposed changes. Our PEP parent member, Tom Shepard, who has attended some of our meetings in the past, will read that statement again at the PEP meeting. I want to thank all of you who wrote in support of this proposal. We know that this decision was made in collaboration with PS 676 and the Red Hook community. And this is how every decision of this magnitude should be made in community with each other, hearing all voices. And speaking of community, I just want to thank the literally hundreds of people in D15 and throughout the city who joined our 3-part teach-in series on the history of school segregation in New York City. Those were being held these last 3 Monday afternoons. Being together, learning about our past, looking towards the future that we will create together. It is very powerful. And this work really just needs to happen. I had dropped in the chat about, I don't know, 20 minutes ago, that there is going to be a day of action on the history of G&T. And that is this Friday, hosted by Bureaucrats for Black Lives and the DECE Anti-Racist Coalition. They're hosting this day of action, which is centered around ending G&T. And Antonia, thank you for dropping that link in the chat. So lastly, I just want to share some information on the CCEC elections and voting period for the election of our new council. As you know, our current CEC council member term ends on June 30th and May 11th. Antonia had mentioned earlier that in this year, all parents get to vote for the councils that that serve their children using their NICSA account. That's the NYC Schools account. There is an 8-minute video that the DOE put together, which gives a brief overview of CCECs and then explains how eligibility works and shows the voting process in detail. Please do plan to watch this at some point in the coming days so that you'll understand how to vote in this election. We're going to be sending this information out through the CEC email, and we'll post it on Facebook as well. Parent coordinator, they'll be able to assist you with any issues you might have in NICSA. If you don't have a NICSA account, they can set one up for you. And if it becomes a last minute situation of setting up the account, there will be paper ballots available. Ideally, you are voting through NICSA, but it is not necessary at this time. Antonia is also going to drop in the chat the link to the voting facts. And that can be viewed and translated into all languages. So I would ask anybody on this call to please do share on our email list, but you'll get via email through your PAs and PA. You have any additional questions, you can contact at schools.nyc.gov. And that's it. So just trying to race through the time saving, but if he has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if not, I will turn the floor over to Superintendent Scott. Okay, great. Okay. Can we make
Thank you.
Superintendent Scott a co-host if necessary?
I can also share the
Antonia, if you just share the PowerPoint, it's fine.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So while we're waiting, I will tell you that in response to Kelly's, to the presentation that we had before, I want to tell you that I was trained in Renzulli 35 years ago. My principal came in and said, I'm sending you to this training, and he sent me. And that I am a staunch believer that children, all children are gifted, if you want to use the terminology. It's just that we don't understand their giftedness because we are looking for one specific kind of verbal giftedness. Okay, so good evening, everybody. I'm going to try and make this as brief as possible. We have so much on the agenda, so let me start by talking about fair student funding. You may have heard it was a big mayoral announcement as well as the chancellor. Next year, for the first time, every public school across the 5 boroughs will receive 100% of their fair student funding. This has never happened before. We're very excited about this, and it will enable schools to have the money to look at staffing and other things. Next, random testing, consent form, and attendance rules reminder. Just please be reminded as a community that as more children are coming back to school, they must come with a random testing consent form. They have to be able to be tested randomly. Students who do not provide the form will automatically be moved to remote instruction, so that they are not in a position where if they are not testable, they cannot infect each other. The other piece is that if students are in a family and they have selected in-person learning, but they do not come to in-person learning consistently and regularly, but in fact are gone for an extended period of time, and there are no mitigating circumstances, these children will also be contacted. They will be, of course, the parents will be asked what the issue is, but then if there is no real issue, they will also be moved to remote instruction. Next one, please. Antonia, can we move the slide? Hello?
Bear with us for a minute, Anita.
Oh, yeah, sure, of course.
Thank you. Antonia is just calling me on the other line. 1 minute. She's having a trouble with her computer, and she has to do a force quit. So I will
I'm gonna
run
call
to
it
the
up
other.
on my computer.
Okay.
I'll talk to it. It doesn't have to be a visual for this. The next one is important that it's a visual, but this one doesn't have to be.
I'm going to run to the other computer and try to set up the screen share while you're doing that.
Anita, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, I think I shared the remote control feature with you, whatever that means. I'm
The
not.
problem is that I'm not on a computer with this. I'm on an
Oh.
iPad. So
Okay.
I literally don't know how to move it.
Okay.
Okay.
So that was my problem too. I was trying to move it. Okay.
Okay.
Now this is where
All
we
right.
left off,
We're
correct?
getting there.
Yes.
The next one. All right. Perfect. This is the one. If we can freeze this one, I
That's
want to
the
talk to,
problem.
because this is the one that most people are talking about. So I wanted to take a few minutes tonight just to talk about a question that I get asked an awful lot. We have, as per the mayor and the chancellor, we have moved, and in alignment with the CDC's changes, we have moved to 3-foot classroom instruction. That has enabled us to bring in more kids 5 days a week, which is a goal where possible. But parents have come and said to me, well, in my school, that isn't happening in every grade, or it isn't happening in my child's class. And why is it that the school down the block, or the school 2 blocks away, or my sister's school is doing something different? So please indulge me for just a few moments as I explain to you what the issue is. So first and foremost, every school is different. They're different in a number of ways. First of all, they're different in the number of people in the school and the number of in-person and returning students. So there are originally the number of in-person students and now additional students. Some of our schools have had significantly high numbers of in-person students from the beginning. For example, PS 39, which has a school that looks similar to the little school in the corner, and other schools, yes, 29 and others have had large in-person populations. And now that they're getting more students in, they of course have to go to a 3-foot change. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to fit them in at all. Some schools, however, such as PS 94, had already moved to a 5-day program because they had a significantly lower number of in-person students and were able to bring in everybody at a 6-foot range. So every school is different that way. Another way that schools are different is that the number of teachers who remain remote due to medical accommodations differs from school to school. And so it is very impactful on a school when they have to worry about staffing in terms of the teachers that they need in the building to deal with children on a 5-day program. Very important. Then there is, of course, the physical space in the building, and that varies from building to building exponentially. It really has to do with how big the building is, how old the building is, the size of the rooms, is there a lunchroom? Is there a gymnasium? Is there an auditorium? Is there a library? Is there a large schoolyard? All of those pieces come into play in terms of building utilization. Another piece that has come into play is that you must remember that food service provisions still require students to be 6 feet apart for lunch and breakfast, and for certain other activities such as phys ed as well. That means that, yes, you can bring all these kids back, but you have to be able to figure out how to feed them at 6 feet apart, even though they may be in class at 3 feet apart. So there are, again, issues of coverage with teachers, issues of space in terms of the physical plant of the building, pieces like that. Next, there are also limitations on the number of people, even in larger spaces. So for example, the original limitation was 25% of what the capacity is. Now I believe it's a little higher, but it still means that you're not filling up the entire cafeteria with all your kids at the same time. Additionally, there is the need to maintain pods or crews or cohorts so that kids are with the kids they have been with and are not with kids that they may never have interconnected with, in terms of worrying about testing and tracing should there be a case in the building. And lastly, and this is one that people don't necessarily know about, is that there are contractual professional development and teacher planning options through school-specific arrangements called SBOs. Those of you who are on SLTs know that schools make basically changes to program and contractual agreements for their school with agreement with our labor partners, the UFT, called SBOs. And if a school is utilizing, for example, 1 remote day a week for professional development, teacher planning, and using online learning those days, or some asynchronous learning those days, that is a respected and acceptable structure. So in cases like that, the school may not go to 5 days in building, it may go to 4 days in building. But the goal of the whole concept is to bring as many children in as possible, as many days a week as possible. And we have prioritized certain children. And one of the groups, many of the groups that we are prioritizing are on kids who have the greatest needs. Our young children who are as Bess and forgive me, I think, yeah, Bess said earlier, that these are the kids who need to learn to read. And it is harder to teach long distance. And so we want them in school, working with their teachers, learning to read, learning to adjust to school, using that foundational literacy and math option to get strong in their early grades. Additionally, and of course, we are concerned about our special needs students, especially those in 12-to-1 classes who need that small group support, but who also need in-person support. We have also prioritized kids in the Horizon program who are of concern that way. And we are trying to bring in as many classes and many groups as possible. Our English language learners who benefit greatly from being in a classroom environment and having the opportunity to speak to other children on a regular basis in our classroom. So this is why it looks different in every school. And I urge you to understand, and please, please have patience. We are trying to do the best. Everybody is trying to do the best for their children. The principals are phenomenal and are really working very hard to ensure that as many kids as humanly possible in a completely safe environment are coming into the building to learn in person. Next slide, please.
So Anita, I'm having the same problem again where I have no control over my keyboard and I can't.
I think I'm having a problem too, so I'm just going to try and open it and just read the rest.
Like I can't even.
Here we go.
Tonya, can you go to that preview mode just by clicking the thing in the right corner?
I dropped the link in the chat to the D15 report. I don't know if that's useful for anybody on the call, if they can look at that at the same time. Is that slide 6 that we're on, Anita?
We are now almost done. We were on we're up to slide 6, which is the Summer Rising program.
Right.
So please allow me to walk you through the summer school program. I will be as brief as possible, but I do want to make clear what the understanding is. For those of you who have not heard, the summer program is called Summer Rising. It is a free summer program for any student who is a city student K-8, including students with disabilities. Anybody who wants their child to participate can send them to the program. The program is a full day program serving breakfast and lunch and I believe snacks, and that it will include not only academics, but it has what is called a wraparound program with a CBO, so that there will be trips, art activities, recreation, daily community building and social emotional supports. And it is divided in terms of grades. Thank you so much. It is divided in terms of grades. K-5 starts July 6th and runs through August 20th. This is the longest summer school has ever been. It runs Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It is a long program, but it will have lots of enrichment camp-like activities. Grades 6 to 8 will run July 6th through August 12th. Notice it's a bit shorter. From Monday through Thursday, one day off, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So it's a little shorter. And grades 9 to 12 run as a high school program. Schools will specifically program students for the courses they need to take to graduate, if that's why they're going to summer school. But they can all participate in enrichment and they can all participate in the exciting camp-like activities. School students who have 12-month IEPs, and these are children in D75 and ESY programs, are going from July 2nd to August 13th, with the exception of July 5th and July 20th, Monday through Friday from 8:10 to 2:40, with the option to stay for an extended day in D75 and the option to stay for an extended day in ESY. The program for ESY children is a little shorter. It runs from 8:10 to 2:10. Again, kids are getting breakfast and lunch in all of these programs. And the last slide, well, not the last slide, but the last major thing to talk about is state testing. State testing this year was done on a opt-in basis. Many parents opted in to have their child tested. They did not have to opt out. Remote students were able to come in just to take the test in ELA and math, but could not be mandated to come in and take the test. So no child was forced to come in and take the test. Ironically, I found that there were, in conversations with principals, there were many parents who did bring their children in. Students may also take the written portion of the New York State Science exam. Our English language learners are also being individually assessed, as they are every year, using the NICESLOT assessment to determine their level of proficiency. This is a diagnostic assessment that speaks to listening, speaking, reading, writing. This diagnostic assessment is used to determine needed supports as per state requirements. So that's the state of testing. Mark, I saw that you asked if we can get the opt-in rates, and as soon as I find out, I'm happy to share them, but we haven't been giving them. All I have is anecdotal evidence. Next slide, please. I am sure many of you are aware, but this ties in beautifully with the previous conversation that we were having about giftedness. And if you look, you will see that April is Autism Awareness Month. This is very near and dear to my heart because, as you know, I have an autistic grandson who is one of the lights of my life and who has had a wonderful school experience in terms of being included in an inclusive environment and respected and treated well by his classmates. And this is something we want for all of our children. And we honor our children who learn in different ways and who express themselves in different ways, because who are we to determine what their gifts are that way? And so we're very grateful for this. And if you have a chance, and if you haven't already looked at it, our D15 calendar month for April included many individuals who were extremely successful, who were on the spectrum, and we will continue to do that kind of thing on a monthly basis. Please look forward to May when we're featuring Asian American and Pacific Island heroes as well. And that's the report, and we are ready for questions and comments.
Thank you, Anita. And yes, we had questions and comments, please. Vincent Liu has a comment. Please, comment.
Oh, thank you. I didn't realize I was the first one. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak. And thank you, Ms. Scott, for the great presentation with those critical informations. I think those are very helpful for our parents. And I think you also brought out about the Asian month. I just want to follow up on that. I think we discussed this before, but I think in light of the anti-Asian crime across the city lately, and upcoming month, which is Asian month, and what is your plan to ensure that all school in District 15 is incorporating Asian historic event and figure into their curriculum next month? And yeah, just like what I said, you and I had discussion this like a few months ago, and I do hope that this do happen next month, because because we have a lot of discussion about inclusiveness, and I think that all this discussion should also apply to our Asian community as well. Thank you.
So I want to reassure you, Mr. Liu, that we of course are going to honor our Asian community, especially next month, but of course we want to do that all year long. And so I have met with my principals and we have discussed this, and we will be providing resources and support. Schools have already begun plans, as I know you know, because your school has already shared their plans with me.
Yeah, we have great principal, yeah.
Yeah, she's great. And I know other schools as well. And so we look forward to sharing resources and to honoring the contributions of Asian American Pacific Islanders to our city, our country, and our world. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Thank you.
It's because my principal actually took all the steps to do all of this. I want to make sure that rest of school and our district actually are doing the similar stuff, so that everyone's like aware of this and you know, understand the history, all of this behind, you know, Asian American. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Liu.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Vincent. There is a question here from Vanessa. She's asking, is there going to be anything for pre-K for the summer? They deserve activity as well and need the interaction. Most they are just starting. Thank you.
So Vanessa, unfortunately, the city has said that there is not a pre-K program specifically. Where there is pre-K program is for children who are part of that 12-month special needs program, and they will have pre-K. But the traditional pre-K programs are not available this summer. And you did, however, remind me of some exciting news that I did not share, and I should have, and I apologize. I am absolutely overwhelmingly delighted to share that next year we will have 3K in District 15. We have not finalized the schools as yet, but I have absolutely put pressure on them for certain schools, and I know that we will finally have 3K in D15, and I am so excited. I literally can't believe that I have seen this. So congratulations to all of us, and for all of us for pushing this. It is amazing.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that announcement, Anita. And do we have any other members of the community? If not, I'm gonna go to the CEC members. If they have any comments or questions, please. Camille, Antonia?
Sure, thank you. Sorry, Anita, I don't know all the keyboard shortcuts.
I thank you for making this possible, and I'm grateful for
Really
any help I can get.
figure out. I still don't know what went on. I still am confused. So my only question is, literally all children are eligible to participate in the summer camp?
Yes, yes.
And like, should all children participate? I mean, should we?
So this is a great question. So these are things to consider if you want to put your kid in the program. One, there is an expectation that if you put your kid in the program, it's not a week on, a week off. It's not, I'm going on vacation for 3 weeks. When I come back for 2 weeks, I'll put my kid in the program. That won't work. There is an expectation of continuity. So that's number one. Number two is there are going to be kids who are mandated for summer school. That has not changed. Kids who are struggling will be encouraged and mandated to go to summer school. Nobody can ever force a child to go to summer school. So what I'm saying is encouraged. But this is a wonderful opportunity for families whose kids can be relatively close in the neighborhood to them, have an experience where they're doing arts and crafts, where they're doing singing, where they're doing some physical activity in addition to the academic learnings, and some social emotional support. So it's a well thought out concept. It is, if you know that you would like this for your child, certainly apply for it. But there is an expectation of consistency. The other thing I want to say is that it is not at every single school. As the city has done before, schools affiliate in certain areas. So for example, 32 is at 58. The 2 schools in Red Hook, actually, to my understanding as of today, will have their own programs. So 676 will have a program and 15 will have a program. The parameter for the program was ensuring that they have a CBO that is attached to the program, because that's a key figure in this. And there will be, for example, 51 is going to be at MS 88. So they will be working together. Schools are working together. I know that there's a group of principals in Sunset Park who are already excited to be working together and be at one school. So they're going to bring their kids together. But it isn't at every single school. So what I would suggest is that you go online, look at the schools that will be available. It's not fully functional as yet. And as soon as I know that it's working properly, I'm going to be honest with you. I've heard parents have been able to go on. I've heard some that haven't. So once I know for sure that this is open, Brenda will reach out to everybody and ensure the schools have, I met with the schools today to talk about it. The point person in our district, the point person is Maggie. And if you need any questions about summer school, please don't hesitate to reach out to Maggie and she will help you. We are excited about this and we want this to be well. It is very important to me that kids have a great summer this summer because they need it, as do our adults, to be honest with you. And so you as a parent are going to make the decision about, is this something you want your child to do? Are you going away on vacation? Are you not going away on vacation? Does your child want to be in school? Or is it going to be something that you have to like push the envelope on every day? You know your children well. Make the decision based on the individual needs of your child. I think that's the best way to go with this.
Thank you, Anita.
Maggie Desir Hart, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Antonia. Tia?
In terms of the 3 feet designation, are we confident that every school in the district is going to be able to achieve the 3 foot distance?
So at this point in time, every school in the district that needs to go to 3 feet is going to 3 feet. But please remember, there are schools that do not need to go to 3 feet. And so they are maintaining 6 feet distance, but they are still bringing in as many children as possible. In fact, 94 is the perfect example because they are bringing in all of their children already. They've been bringing them all in. Anybody who wanted to go in person 5 days a week is going 5 days a week already. Our pre-K program, Vanessa, that is the district pre-K, has been 5 days a week since the beginning of the year. So we have schools that are doing 5 days a week in 6 foot distancing. On the other hand, many of our schools are now switching to 3 feet. But again, please understand the 3 feet is in the classroom. It is not in the lunchroom. It is not in the hallways. It is in the classrooms. Certainly not in gym.
But there will be a minimum of 3 feet
Yes,
between every
absolutely.
student in the classroom in every school in the
Absolutely.
district.
They've
Great.
had to have, thank you. You brought something else up here that I need to say. Every school before they could do this had to do what is called a BRT walkthrough. And that is they had to take the building response team, walk the building and make sure that it is happening. And they had to then write to me and say that the BRT had approved it. Additionally, there have been surprise visits and planned visits from people from Central. I should mention in passing, just because it's very nice, that we were visited twice this week by it's only Tuesday and we've already had 2 visits by the first deputy chancellor who visited PS 10 and then visited PS 15 today and had good visits and was able to see the quality of our instruction across the board. And we're very delighted about that. So yes, Tia, they can do it.
Thank you, Tia. And Bess?
I have no comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to Kimberly.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Anita.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to go to Claudia.
Hi, yes. I think my questions are sort of echoed with what others have said of just the concern of it not being available in all schools. And it's been really great seeing schools already or principals already partner with each other for the Schools Rising or Summer Rising program. My concern would be of assuming that the 3 feet distance rule or some level of limitations on bodies in the classroom is
yes
still in place for the summer. And it's hard to assess right now what the demand would be, but it is hopefully promising that they'll be able to deliver that every person that wants a spot can get one. My question, I guess, is mostly is how, are teachers, like current teachers, being involved in this? Like, are they going to be part of the curriculum or the staffing of this? Is there enough teachers that would be able to support the staffing needs, or is the DOE searching elsewhere, and what's the process for that?
So Claudia, this to me is the $64,000 question. We are at summer school historically has been manned by school teachers from schools. Schools usually are giving their teachers the option to work and to make a little extra money over the summer. And so teachers historically have done this. I did this as a teacher. I did it as a staff developer and taught. We've usually had enough teachers, but this is a very large scale. So you're right. We don't know two things yet. One, we don't know how many teachers are willing to work after the time they put in the pandemic to come in the summer and work a long summer. The second thing we don't know is how many kids are coming as yet. Those two pieces are still variables. And because of that, I can't give you a direct answer and say, yeah, we're going to be fine. We're going to have enough staff at every single school from that school. What I can say is that because we are putting schools together, it gives a better opportunity for teachers from several schools to work with what will for sure be a smaller number of kids. Because I guarantee you that not every kid from every school is coming for the entire summer. So I think we'll be okay, but I cannot say to you right now, yes. And in that point, it is a citywide opportunity to work. So that if you are, for example, you live in Brooklyn, but you ordinarily teach in the Bronx, you may be able to find a position in a school in Brooklyn, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to go to Mark now.
Hi, Anita.
Hi, Mark.
Wonderful. I had to turn my camera on because I have to see you. It's so nice to see you. I cannot wait till we get in the same room together again. It is great to see you. And just wanted to wish you great health and your staff too. I hope your staff's doing well during this crazy time. Wanted a couple thank yous. Just thanks for the commitment on getting us the numbers on the opt-in. I'm really interested in seeing those things. I know we care about that. I have a niece also who is autistic. So thank you for shining a light on Autism Month. That's great. And I am also, like Vincent, interested in kind of hearing a little bit more about what we're doing for Asian American Inclusivity Month. But the two questions I did have, one, there's just been a lot of news about masking and how kids are treated with masks this week because we have some inhuman people on the television telling parents to go out and harass kids in masks. I know you are very good at responding to these things, making sure your principals know about that, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about our preparedness for any of those type of situations and what we're telling our principals. And then two, just as a lower stakes thing, but we do have the elections coming up. We talked a little bit about the past. I wonder if you could also talk a little bit about, are you doing anything with the principals to kind of nudge them to tell parents, hey, get out there and vote. This is your chance. And are they sending anything through? This is a totally new system. Are you doing anything at the central level to address that? Thanks. So I'll go on mute and listen.
Okay, so let me see if I got all of this. Okay, so I want to say something about the whole mask situation. We have been singularly, I think blessed is the right word, that our teachers and our kids have been supported constantly in their wearing of masks. And I can tell you this from personal experience, because for the past month, I have done school visits remotely, but also into classrooms live streamed. And I can tell you that in every classroom I went into, the teachers were masked, the kids were masked. And even in our youngest classrooms, our kindergarten, our pre-K, the kids were quite comfortable wearing their masks. There was no stigma to it. And I know that this whole thing, this whole politicized piece about masks and about just the way this whole COVID thing has been politicized is something that principals are very upset about and are very supportive of kids and are very socially responsible in terms of supporting kids with masks. Thank God, and I don't want to say jinx us, but we have not heard anything about any kid or any adult approaching a kid about a mask.
And
So,
Anita,
so far,
just
so good.
raised it in light of the CDC made some big announcements today also. And
Yeah, I'm waiting to see what happens with
liberalizing
that
some of the
one.
rules
Yeah.
around masking. And
So
I wonder
one
if parents are going to be confused about it and maybe behaving differently outside the schools and that type of thing, because we are at some point going to have no masks at some point, hopefully, God bless. But I presume it's going to start getting confusing really fast from now until the end of school, and wonder if we're thinking about that with principals.
So of course, so one of the things that you have to remember is that many of our schools, especially a school that's near and dear to your heart, 146, have used outdoor space extensively. And so their children are used to being in outdoor space. And in fact, when I visited 146 and met with Anna Allenbrook, she told me that she does not allow any eating in the building. Every snack, everything is, the kids go outside, they go out in all kinds of weather, they have a whole system set up, and many schools are saying the same thing. So the time where the kids would take off a mask for eating, oftentimes they are outside, which is in line with what the CDC announced today. What the CDC announced is that, and they were very careful, it is for vaccinated people. If you are outside, you do not need a mask. However, if you're indoors, you do. I think it's going to take a little time before we're maskless. I do. I think it's going to take a while, and I'm going to tell you that I honestly think we'll still be wearing masks in the fall. It may be wrong, but I think so. What I will say is when you are in an indoor environment, again, what I've seen is kids in masks, teachers in masks, administrators in masks, even on my principals conference, if they are in the building, if they are not at home in their own house, then they are in fact wearing their masks. Some of them are wearing 2 masks. And we are very responsible about that because it is important for our children and they serve as role models for our children. So that's number one. Mark, what was the second question? The one that you said was lower
whether or not
stakes.
the central office is going to give a nudge
Yes,
on the election
yes.
that's coming up. It's a first of a kind, and I'm wondering if you can give anybody some encouragement. I haven't heard a lot about it in my circles, and I'm wondering if I'm going to see an email or how that's going to work.
So we have been, our office and the central office has held training sessions, has held outreach, has mandated outreach to the parent coordinators and to everything to outreach to their families. Again, please understand that they have supported and they have kept track on how many families have NISCA accounts. They have mandated that we do outreach to parents to encourage them to have NISCA accounts and now to encourage them to vote. Of course, we're not telling them who to vote for. That's not our forte. But we are talking about the forums, we are sharing the information, and that is happening. I can't guarantee everything with this. It is a new format. It is something that people are new to. So I think that it's going to take a little getting used to, but I think that you will definitely have more voting than you've ever had before. And I'm for sure that this is something that Central is pushing extensively.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Anita. And Camille?
Thank you, Yvonne. Anita, as always, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you so much. I have 2 questions about fair student funding. If you
Yes.
don't know the answer, that's fine. It's a little bit in the weeds. So we heard that all schools will receive 100% of their fair student funding. And that's going to go on for 3 years, I believe.
I think
was the
so.
commitment.
I think so.
I wonder, some of the schools already had been receiving over 100%. Do you know if those schools will return to 100%? Or do you know if they'll still be getting the overage? Because there was a sort of equity issue there to begin with. So that's one question. I haven't been able to get
I
the-
will ask, I'm not sure. I haven't heard, so I will find out.
And then the other question is that later in the meeting today, we're going to be reviewing this draft of a fair student funding resolution that talks about shifting the weights a little bit. And there isn't really anything detailed about students in temporary housing. And, you know, they can fall into various categories, but they really need the most support of all, not just while they are in the temporary housing, but post that situation as well. And like when I'm looking at where the fair student funding weights are, the only place that I could see that landing is under academic intervention. But of course, we know that it's more than academic. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
So like you, Camille, I'm very cognizant about the trauma that our children who live in temporary housing live with on a day-to-day basis. And that it is a significant impactor on their academic success, on their growth, on their social emotional skills, and literally on their brain chemistry, literally because of the level of stress. And so I agree with you. I think that they deserve more money. And I think this is something that we can raise. And I think that you are very innovative and thoughtful, as you all always are, in pushing for this. It is long-term. And even after children move out of temporary housing and move into a more permanent setting, it takes a long time until they have acclimated. In many cases, because of the long-term stress, it really is very, very, very impactful. So I think that this is something to talk about. I think they need a lot of support. I think that the city is looking very much at social emotional supports. They're looking at mindfulness and other things as well. And I think that if you raise this, I think the categories for fair student funding may not change, but there may be a way to promote, to add a category of emotional support if you push for it. So I would suggest that, and I would certainly support you in pushing for it. It is literally difficult, and I have to give a shout out right now to the Parents Association and the staff and the administration at 124, which is dealing with a large number of students in temporary housing that have opened next door to them, and they have done nothing but be welcoming and supportive of these kids and their families, and are working tirelessly to see what they can do. So kudos to everybody who's helping the kids in temporary housing.
Thank you so much, Anita.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you, Anita. As usual, you're providing us with all this information and coming to our meetings. Thank you, Anita. And now we're going to move to Camille already announced the District 15, the diversity plan update. I think, Camille, you already mentioned that.
No, Yvonne, I had been talking about the PAR rezoning. It's actually
that's
about
right.
the middle school.
Okay. So we have the update
I see
now.
a bunch of people on the call. Anita, did Andy, were you going to talk about that? I'm not sure.
Andy and Gina and I were going to talk about it together.
All right.
Okay, great.
Thank you. The next item is D15 diversity plan update. Thank you, Anita.
So Andy, I'm going to ask you to share the PowerPoint. Camille, can you help with that? Andy can share it, but you'd have to give him the ability to
Yeah,
share it.
just give me a minute. I have to run to the other computer one.
I'll just take a quick second to say hi and introduce myself, unless that's jumping the gun, Anita.
Andy, please feel free to jump the gun. For those of you who don't know, Andy, take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andy McClintock. I work for the Central Department of Education. I work for this Office of Student Enrollment. My job there is supporting schools and districts that are developing diversity plans or sort of new diversity or school integration policy. I worked on the District 15 diversity plan with Anita, and I'm sure there are other folks potentially on this call. Everyone, many people here, the entire CEC, but sat on the working group with Anita. I'm a former analyst, and so I'm going to be speaking a little bit about some of the enrollment data that we have to share, but also would love to answer any questions and just happy to be a resource. Happy always to be here with the District 15 community. So I'm going to share my screen here. And let's see, we can make this
Thank you, Andy.
full screen mode. Can you all see that? Does it look all right?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you, Andy.
Great.
It feels like coming home because of the font. So it looks very familiar and comforting. So for those of you who know, this is the font that's used for the diversity plan, and we are happy to give what I want to call an executive summary, a very, almost like a movie trailer of something that's coming. And that is a very, very deep dig into the diversity plan that we will share with the CEC in the fall. We are working with WXY, and we are putting together a look at all the data, look at all the areas, and just be able to report out at a very in-depth level. So we're very excited about this, and we are also going to take you through our little executive summary right now. So this is our agenda. There's background, progress, updates, recommendation, a little bit about COVID. We're just going to gloss on that, some data analysis, and then some next steps. So the background. For those of you who were not engaged in the development of the diversity plan, we have a timeline later that will make you see how this came about. But basically, it was a community engagement effort, many, many meetings over the course of over a year, looking at planning and then initiating by creating a working group that reflected parents, teachers, administrators, and most importantly, voices from all areas of the district. Significantly, not Park Slope, but also Sunset Park, Red Hook, Kensington, etc. This was very important because we wanted to hear from all members, all areas, all constituencies in the district. So for those of you who don't know, this is our map. And this little pink thing in the northwestern corner of Brooklyn is us. Progress update. So these, I'm going to let Gina talk to this because Gina is an integral part of my office, and she works with people on a daily basis around equity and around our initiative.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. So key coordinating roles that were implemented as part of the D15 diversity plan is an ongoing process that requires coordination and collaboration between the district and the DOE central offices. Those roles encompass an equity coordinator, myself, the superintendent, our parent coordinators who we have weekly check-in meetings with, our principals, and our school-based equity teams.
And I can just say that, you know, in addition to the folks who are supporting this work at a district level, We also have a large number of central offices and central staff who are supporting both the folks at the district and also folks actually embedded in schools. And so we have offices like mine, which is the Office of Student Enrollment. We have the Office of Pupil Transportation, which helps to coordinate busing and transportation to schools. We have offices that support translation and interpretation, offices that support students who are multilingual learners. And we also have a specific staff member within the Office of Student Enrollment who is hired after the District 15 diversity plan, and part of her role is to help to support schools in the sort of admissions and enrollment element of this diversity plan. I want to name that not all of, there are many, many more offices and individuals that are maybe not on this slide, but we are also here and want to do everything that we can to support the district in its implementation.
So this is our timeline. And as you can see, it covers the gamut from the fall of 17, when we began the work around equity in setting up our equity Congress and our equity teams, which we began then, but also beginning to talk about changing the middle school process and beginning that summer to work with the summer before this to talk about working with WXY to begin the process of forming our groups, and then working throughout this period of time to put forward a plan that we would present to the mayor and the chancellor, and which was approved, I still remember this, September 18th, 2018. And the plan basically said the screens were removed. We put in priority standards, and we encouraged the idea of barrier-free schools, which are in the works, of course, citywide. We in the fall of 19, we hired Gina, who has been a gift from God and has done so much work with us. And at the same time, we began something very new and different that Camille talked to, that Vanessa is a part of, and that is looking at rezoning through an equity lens, an integration lens for the first time. This is precedent setting. So not only were we looking at removing the screens in District 15 for middle school, but we were looking at the same kind of lens for rezoning in terms of the District 15 addition in PS 32, which gave us the opportunity to rezone. They, unfortunately, shortly thereafter, we have fall of 20, and we're gonna start to go into COVID. And that brings us to now. So recommendation. There were two cycles of recommendation, the integration cycle and the inclusion cycle. So many of them fell into both areas. All screens were removed. Admissions priorities were put in place at all middle schools. And I have to say, and Andy will talk to this later, that there were many people who were naysayers and who felt that this would be the end of District 15 middle schools and the end of quality in District 15. And this integration piece led to the work with the PAR rezoning process and enabled us, because we at this point had some of the New York State integration grant, to fund the PAR rezoning process. The DEI coordinators were hired in D15 and at the central offices. We began to look at the demographics year by year. The DOE put out an online recruitment tool for school with recommendations and best practices and free and low cost ways to showcase the schools. Principals did an enormous amount of outreach. They called families, they held open houses, they absolutely walked people around their buildings constantly. They did personal outreach to families, and people began to see the schools for what they are, excellent opportunities for all children. D15 Central began using interpretation equipment, and when I looked at this today, I had to laugh. I wanted interpretation equipment so badly, and we got it. And now that we have gone to a virtual world, to be honest, we don't rarely meet. We are able to do, as we are doing tonight, interpretation absolutely virtually. And that has been one of the positive impacts of the pandemic, which has had so many negative impacts on our families, so many negative impacts, because it has made us see how deeply segregated and socially economic divides have impacted families during the COVID epidemic. If you really look at this, and this is research based, obviously, the families that have been hit hardest have been families of color, have been low income families, have been immigrant families. You can look at Sunset Park and you can talk to the principals in Sunset Park and talk to the families in Red Hook, and they will tell you how hard they have been hit and how many people have been hit by this. And then the residual side effect of racist behavior to our Asian American families and all of these things that have come out of COVID. Next screen. So the Gina, it's all yours. I completely forgot.
Inclusion. So we initiated the district-wide events to enhance intra-district family, parent, and student engagement, such as the science fair and the fantastic poetry slam. It was well attended, well received. We had so many children who participated. We had to break it up into 4 nights because we just had such a great response. We bolstered community engagement and invested in historically marginalized communities through our participatory action research PAR process. We increased school-based hires of multilingual candidates to fill the language barriers between families. We expanded culturally responsive and sustaining curriculums in classrooms, CRSC. We conducted anti-racist training for all principals. There are plans underway for the new maritime-focused middle school in Red Hook. Camille mentioned it. PS 676 is transitioning and will be voted on before PEP tomorrow. And most schools have restorative justice coordinators or a liaison designated to help reconcile differences amongst their peers. These are just a few of the things. We've had the well-attended Soup with the Soup, which is the superintendent's town hall. That really was, again, another well-attended event. The AAPI town hall for our Asian American and Pacific Islander families and community. We've definitely had outreach regarding the technology, making sure all students had the technology needed when this COVID situation with the quarantine started. As I mentioned before, the parent coordinator weekly meetings and our, equity congresses that started several years ago. We meet monthly. We have an agenda that we set based on what's going on in our communities and in the world around us. And one of the other things is the Youth Congress. And we unfortunately haven't been able to, have the Youth Congress as much as we like, because the thought process was why to have the students sit in front of a screen for yet another Zoom meeting, but that's why the Poetry Slam came about, so.
And if I can add to that, I want to add a couple of things. One, I want to add that we have had an enormous deepening of the work around restorative justice in terms of restorative circles at every school. We have had professional development, working with Morningside at many of our schools. All of our schools, as I had previously said, were trained in ruler and are using the process. There's a lot of social emotional support, but there's also a deeper level of social emotional support in terms of we're having training on our LGBTQ community. We're having training. We're going to have training, in fact, in May for principals with Goldie Muhammad. We've already worked with Dr. Eddie Fergus. We've worked with the Office of equity and access. Repeatedly, we were part of the first cohort to train all of our principals. More than half of the entire staff in District 15 has been trained in implicit bias. It is really kudos to everybody. Something has happened in District 15 that it's not measurable, but it's visible. And that is schools that previously gave more of what I call posters and potlucks approach to integration. With the murder of George Floyd, with the concern about Black Lives Matter, with the concern about equity and anti-racism, there has been a commitment and a partnership and a collaboration with schools to look at every family, every culture, every nationality, every language, every member of our community as valuable, and that has made a huge difference. Schools that did not partner before are partnering now. 321, for example, is partnering with 169. Other schools are partnering as well. 32 and 58 partner. Other schools are getting together. It is so much deeper, so much more important. The equity teams are looking at libraries. Teachers are looking at libraries. And really going deep. We're doing work on all of this across the district. So this is not just about a pretty thing that happened and we're finished with this. This is changing the culture of the district. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy, who's going to take you through some data.
Thanks. All right, so I'm going to try to be really brief. Just brief with this beautiful, colorful, complicated slide. I'm going to try to break down everything that we're showing folks. And I also just want to preview, I know Anita said this, and I think we're going to say it again at the end, but everything that we're looking at today is just a sort of in progress preliminary update that we want to share with the CEC. Our analysts, along with Anita and folks in the District 15 office, and potentially with some external help, are putting together a ton of data that we would love to share with folks. And we're hoping to have that ready to share by the fall. This is looking at enrollment. And what this slide is showing is the enrollment at all of the middle schools in District 15. And the length of those bars there, the sort of colors, the color and the gray, are showing the fraction of students that qualify for the priority that was set out in the District 15 diversity plan. So that priority was for students whose family's income qualify them federally for free and reduced price lunch, which we have sort of labeled as FRL, for students that are English language learners, ELL, and for students that are living in temporary housing, STH. And so if a school has, for example, 52% of students that meet one of those criteria, their bar would be 52% of the way across with that kind of color there. Now they're stacked in a way that show the years leading up to and the first year of the diversity plan. So yellow is 2016-17, pink is 17-18, blue is 18-19, and green is 19-20. And 2019-2020 is the first year that we have that the District 15 diversity plan recommendations around admissions and enrollment were implemented. So that was the removal of screens, and it was the addition of a priority for 52% for students that met the characteristics that I said before. So the plan also created this target range, and they said the goal of this plan is to have each school fall within this target range after, I believe it was 4 years or something like that. And the target range went from 40 to 75%. And so what we see on the right here, this kind of column with the years and these little dots shows the number of schools that were in that target range. So we're looking at the numbers of schools that were in that target range 3 years before the plan, 2 years before the plan, 1 year before the plan, and 1 year after the plan. And what you can see is that in 16-17, there were 3 schools that fell within that range. In 17-18, there were 2 schools that fell within that range. In 18-19, there were again 3 schools. And in 2019-2020, we see that there are 8 schools in that range. That's a pretty sizable shift from the trend that we saw the years before. Now, some of you might be thinking, this is 2021. And in fact, if you are a frequenter of CEC meetings, you may know that we've already shared this data with you. Now, it actually takes quite a long time for us to snapshot and ultimately audit enrollment data. And so official enrollment data for 2020 is only like, if it's available, this is 2020, 2021, if it's available, it's only just available. So we actually don't have official data to share, but I'm gonna do two things that are kind of bad, but I think you'll like them. One is that I'm going to share some unofficial data with you. And the other is that I'm going to share it as a kind of just in Excel. This is not, I hate doing this. I'm not a big fan. I love some of one of the things that was really amazing about the District 15 diversity plan was some of the ways that we, WXY and the other folks that worked on it, presented data to the community. I love data, but it can be very intimidating and hard to understand. I hate sharing Excel spreadsheets, but this is not a sort of like official final number. And so we don't want to make it pretty and put it in this presentation and share it with you. We want to wait until we have those final numbers, and then we'll share that back with the CEC and ultimately with the broader D15 community. This is showing the same, so the column on the right, which says enrollment 2019 as of 10/31/2019, that's official enrollment as of October 31st, 2019. And that's the same thing we were looking at on that back slide. The column on the left, the two columns on the left, show enrollment in October 2020. Now, again, this is not official. This is an unaudited snapshot. So this was just one day we just took the data and this is what it is. I think it was October 8th. What you can see is that the number of schools, so again, on this spreadsheet, the schools that are falling within that target range, 40 to 70%, are highlighted in green. And so what you can see is it's exactly the same schools. I cannot promise you that when we share final data that it will be identical to the numbers that you are seeing here, but I wanted to share this as a sort of a kind of update for folks so that folks can see there's not huge shifts from the first year of the implementation to the second year of the implementation here. So I'm going to go back to our presentation. Thanks for bearing with me. All right. So this is just looking at enrollment data. This is also looking at enrollment data, but it's showing something a little different. So what this is essentially showing is kind of the total number of students enrolled in D15 middle schools over a number of years. And so again, we have the same sequence of years. We've got 2016-17, 2017-18, 2018-19, and 2019-20. Now, one question that a lot of people had with the implementation of the District 15 diversity plan was, what's going to happen? Are parents going to leave the district? Is it where we're going to see huge changes in enrollment? Are we going to see spikes in enrollment? Are more families going to come in? Like, what's going to happen to enrollment? And what we see here is that enrollment is very much in line with what it has been over the previous years. So you can see, actually, if you add together the colorful bar, which is the share of students that are FRL, ELL, and STH, and the gray bar, you get the total enrollment. So you can see that total enrollment somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 students each year. What you can see is that there was a slight increase from 2016 to 2017, 16, 17, 17, 18, kind of a big increase from 17, 18 to 18, 19, and then actually a decrease in the first year of the District 15 diversity plan. And you might say, like, huh, that's interesting. Why is there a decrease? Like, maybe that's attributable to the implementation of the diversity plan. And to be honest, that is a possibility, but I'll point out a couple of things. One thing that you see is that 2019, 2020 enrollment is still above enrollment for 16, 17 and 17, 18. The other thing that I'll tell you, and you'll have to believe me tonight, but I promise that this is something that we can share and include in this report, is that if you follow that cohort, the kids who are fifth graders, or the number, the 2018, 2019 sixth graders. So these are kids who are fifth graders in the year before that. That's a large class. And you can look at that class size. It's like a bubble that you can follow through all through their time in elementary school. They were big when they were first graders, they were big when they were second graders, it was a big class when they were third graders, and you can follow them through the year. It's kind of this bubble of a lot of kids. And so even though we're seeing a decrease in enrollment, it's not, I think a lot of that decrease is just the fact that there were actually fewer students who were in 5th grade the next year who ultimately became 6th graders. And we're going to look a lot more at that when we release data, when we sort of put together a more formal report from the D15 diversity plan. I have 2 more quick slides. I'll be as fast as I can. This is a slide that shows the chance of matching to a school that you put on your application. So typically, most families across the city match to a choice that is on their application, but some families, either because they don't have a lot of choices or because all of the choices on their application are full of other students, do not match to a choice on their application and are assigned a school. And so what we're looking at here is the number of students who received a choice on their application, or the percentage of students that received a choice on their application based on the number of choices they put. So what we see is that as you put more choices on your application, the chance of matching to one of those choices increases. Now, these are District 15 choices. So when it says 3 or fewer choices, that could be, you've got Nest plus M, you've got some other citywide things on there, you've got some Brooklyn things on there, and then you have 3 District 15 schools. It doesn't just mean 3 total, it means 3 District 15 schools. That's not a big number. But even of the students that had 3 or fewer choices on their application, still 90% of them match to one of those choices. When you move up to 6 or more choices, you see that it becomes very high. If you have 6 District 15 choices on your application, 98% of those students matched to a school on their application. And if you had 9 or more District 15 choices on your application, every single student with 9 or more District 15 schools on their application matched to one of those choices. Now, you might wonder, what choice are folks matching to? And so what we're looking at here is we're looking at the percentage of students that match to a specific level of choice on their application. And we're comparing 2 years. We're comparing 2018, which was the first year before the plan, to 2019, which was the first year after the plan. And, you can see some differences here. I'll walk you through them quickly. We see actually after the implementation of the plan, more students match to their first choice. So we actually see that it went from 48% up to 51%. When you look at the top 3 choices, your first, your second, your third choice, we see that the year before the plan, 87% of students matched to one of those top 3 choices. And the year after the plan, that number went down to 78%. When you look at top 5 choices, we see that the year before the plan, 97% of students matched to one of their top 5 choices, and 88% of students after the plan matched to one of their top 5 choices. I'm going to spare you. Like I could talk a lot about this. We could have a CEC meeting just where I come and we just talk about this one piece of data. But I think this is really important to share, because at least to me, the bottom line of all of this is that the sky isn't falling down. What we're seeing in terms of the choices that families are matching to, even if it's slightly lower or slightly different than it has been in previous years, it looks to me like, roughly looking at this, that there's still, a kind of half chance of matching to your first choice, a 3 out of 4 fairly high chance of matching to one of your top 3 choices, and a pretty decently high chance of matching to one of your top 5 choices across the city. So I'd love to, I think there's a lot here that can be added to and that can be updated. I'd love to talk a little more with folks from the CEC, and we can either do it tonight or we can do it in the future about what other data you would like to see and what data you'd like to see included in that report. And I'd love to keep that conversation ongoing. And with that, I am going to pass it back to Superintendent Scott.
Thank you, Andy. I want to say something, and please correct me, Andy, if I'm wrong, because this is right off the cuff. When you put up that little piece of data from the little Excel spreadsheet, one of the things that I noticed is that there were 2 schools that had been significantly free and reduced lunch to the point of 90% previously. Thank you. So if you look at 821 and you look at, is it 88? 88 falls into this, 821 falls into this, and one other one. This one and 88, you're noticing that they are falling. These are schools where there had been significantly higher numbers. 136 is the other one. If you look, I'm going to use 136 because it's a really good example, and 821, and they're in the same building. So if you look at this, in the first year of the diversity plan, 93% of the kids, 93% were free and fell into that priority category. By the second year, we're having more kids, but we're having less kids in that priority category. It's not a huge jump. They're not in the zone yet, but they're only a little bit out of the zone, which it means that in the second year, parents were looking at this school and saying, this is an option for my kid. This is a possibility. Look at 821. It went from 89% down to 80. It's literally on the cusp. Again, people are seeing this as a wonderful, viable school. So I am hopeful as we go digging deeper into the data that we will be able to say that not only are we moving schools like 51 into a good place, but we are moving schools like 821 and 136 also into a place where they are more diverse and they are reflecting more of what the district looks like. So that, I had to say that. I'm sorry. I hope I'm saying it right, Andy.
Yeah, it sounds exactly right to me. Again, I'll just remind folks that when we have the final data, we'll share it with everyone, but I don't think we're going to see big changes in those trends once we look at the actual audited register. So,
And again, kudos, I have to give kudos. This is not because of me, this is because of the incredible principals and the work of the teachers and the principals and the families and the great schools that they are. And we're very proud of them. Okay, next steps. Okay. So we will be presenting to, we're working with D15 and Central to put together a very rich, very full report. As I said, this is your trailer that will come out reflecting the progress in the 2020-21 school year in the fall of 2021. We just started working with, I have to give them a compliment, WXY literally supported us in putting this together in a very, very short span of time. So I'm excited to work with them. I wanted to continue the work, and they will be working with the PAR process and everything to be able to put together work that represents clearly to the CEC, to everybody in the community, the work that we are doing. We're very grateful, you know this. We just received the funding for the 3rd year of the SIP planning grant. We are very excited about this. Andy knows this is a huge deal. And what this will enable us to do is to start to look at things like school-based enrichment. It will allow us to look at things like continuing the PAR process and continuing to do greater community outreach. It will enable us to provide libraries for certain schools that need extra support, to provide materials for schools that need extra support, and most importantly, to provide high quality professional development. One of the things that came up tonight in school-based enrichment, I wanted to tell you that we do in District 15 already. We have a mentor program that's called PPLP, where our strongest teachers are working with other teachers, and we've expanded it actually across another district to support other teachers. where we are training our teacher leaders and they are providing support to other teachers to cross-pollinate great practices and great things that are happening in schools all across the district. So this will enable us to continue that work, to bring in professional development, as I said, with Karen Mapp, with Goldie Muhammad, to bring in social emotional support, and we will be continuing to do that. Again, the PAR is going to present recommendations in May, and this is something that we have used some of our funding from the grant to support, because that it is precedent setting, and this way we were able to do it without any conflict whatsoever. So we're very grateful for this. Please come back and watch the whole movie on the big screen. We thank you for your support of us, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anita. Thank you to Gina and Andrew for giving us the presentation tonight. Thank you, as usual. Oh my God. Yeah. Camille.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you for this presentation. I really appreciate it. I do not have any questions at this time. Just thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And next on our agenda, we're going to go with the high school updates from Superintendent Janice Rose, and Jen Goldberg is on call. Thank you.
Hey, Vaughn, we're not doing any
Yes.
questions on the, I know it's late, so I don't want to keep everybody, but we're not doing any questions on the diversity plan.
No, at this moment, Camille, I think we're not having questions.
I was expecting to be able to do questions, but I also do want to respect the time. It is way later than we were planning. Maybe we could just do 2 questions. Or if people have, if they want to drop questions in the chat.
I can type them in too.
I'm happy to answer, Mark.
I can type them in if I know it's late for everybody, and I don't want to keep people. I do think we should spend the time to get the pub, ask the questions on this topic of all topics. But I'll type my questions in, and you can answer them at your leisure.
I would invite others to also just type into the chat if you have a question, and we'll do our 100% best to follow up on that.
Thank you those that have questions, and please, if you can put them on the chat, and then we can move again with the high school updates, please.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good evening, CEC. I'm happy to be here with you. I just need to share my screen, and then I just, if you could just allow me to do screen sharing.
Just 1 second.
Are you guys able to do it? Otherwise, I have to go to the other computer.
No, I'm not able. Maybe.
Camille, I think you have to go to the other computer because we're just co-hosts.
Yeah.
Oh wait, it's Jen Goldberg, correct? She's a co-host.
Well, now I can share. I wasn't able to. Thank you. Okay. You can see my screen okay?
Yes, we can see.
Wonderful. So good evening, everybody. I'm just going to give you a quick update from the high schools on behalf of our superintendent, Janice Ross. And so I'll be brief because I know it's late. I just wanted to present some district data for you. We are holding steady at 84% a really nice rise since the beginning of the year. We've been progressively increasing our attendance. This is the district data for D15. We have an average of 86%, which is actually higher than the whole superintendency average. So yay, District 15. We are excited that we have a nice average of 86%, and we keep striving to increase to get our students, increase our student attendance. We also wanted to share that our district average for students with disabilities who are fully receiving services indicated on their IEPs has increased from 50% to 76% through the efforts of many between December and March. And you can see that the D15 schools have all increased in number of students receiving full services as per their IEP. We also just wanted to share again the district data around our NX appeals. The district average for NX reconciliation is 65%, and the district average for NX appeals granted was 32%. All appeals submitted were approved, and students have until June to complete the coursework. And I wanted to share with you also some community events. I think I had one other data slide that may be coming up. But we wanted to share with you the April 8th that we presented the Mitzvah Project to the district. It was very well received. It was in recognition of Holocaust Remembrance Day. We're going to be now also hosting monthly meetings for teachers that have been designated as eSTEM champions. Executive Superintendent Watts, her passion is STEM, and it's very important for all of us to make sure that our schools advance their STEM programs and STEM initiatives. So we're going to be starting that meeting this month, actually this Friday, where I'll actually be hosting that meeting. Teachers are continuing their work with Dr. Muhammad on culturally responsive sustaining education. And they're also our MLL teachers, our multilingual learner teachers, are working with Dr. Klein in our multilingual learner series. We have something new and exciting to announce to you. We have created a Connecting with Family series. We have the flyer there for you. And you'll be able to, the Zoom link will be coming soon, but you'll be able to RSVP for one or all of the events. Camille, I will share this with you in a separate email so that you can share with the community at large. Wanted to give, oh, this is the other data slide. This is the learning preference update data for our schools. In D15, you can see the total number of students enrolled in each school and the number of student families that requested for their students to move into blended learning. So here you see the new total of students in the buildings that were blended, and this includes the new, the number of students that are now opting in. So in some of our schools, we even have more than half the students returning to the building, such as with Millennium and Sunset Park as well. We do have a number of students who have decided to opt back into blended learning. As always, we have our April community newsletter available so that you can see all the wonderful things happening in Brooklyn North High Schools, including D15. So I will share this with Camille and she can share with you so that you can access the link and look at all of the amazing things that D15 schools and others are doing at this time. Back in March, we had a celebration of Women's History Month by celebrating women's leaders. So we had matched different leaders in our building to these historic and celebrated female women in our history. So we were very excited to host a series in March. And then of course, this was the flyer that we used to advertise for the Mitzvah Project, which was well attended and well received. And that's about it. So I want to thank you. If you have any questions for the high school superintendent, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I'll try to get to them. And if I can, I'll make sure that the information goes back to you through Camille. And thank you and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jan.
You're welcome.
And please, if any questions, it could be on the chat. and also our members. Any questions or comments? Camille,
I'm good. Thank you so much, Jen.
You're
Antonia,
welcome, Camille.
I don't have any questions. Thank you so much.
Tia,
I'm good. Thank you.
Beth,
No, thank you.
Kimberly,
No questions, thanks.
Claudia,
No, I'm great. Thank you.
Mark.
No, just thank you, Jennifer. It's nice to have high school representation here to bring the whole, to close the loop on this thing. It is the first year I think we've done it in a real comprehensive way, and you really do a great job. So
Oh, thank you
for
so
doing it.
much. I'm happy to provide the information, and please make sure you reach out to us if you need anything.
Well, we know it's 10 o'clock also, and you have stuff to do. So thank you very much.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you very much, Jan. And we're gonna move into our agenda or the old business.
I wonder
Um,
if we could consider just adjourning for another day.
All right.
I'm just looking at the list, and I don't think that there's anything terribly urgent that needs to be done tonight. Is that okay with everybody? I know this has been like the longest meeting I think we've had in a really long
Yeah.
time.
Yes,
In line with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn early.
and I second it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me thank all of our guests and all of the people who are still on this call, our
Thank you.
presenters.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, especially Superintendent Scott. And so, okay, so 9:48 adjournment. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Good night. Have a good night.